Hey everyone, I'm Noah, and welcome to Noah Does Coding. This is the channel that takes you from your first line of SwiftUI all the way to a shipped app, and that's exactly what this video is. Meet Encore, a concert tracker. We have some onboarding flow where we can actually introduce the users to the app, even ask them to show reminders. Once you've been taken into the app, we have rateable and searchable shows. Interested to learn more about the show? Click on it to get more information, even edit and make changes, notes, rating, even a set list that you can swipe to delete or adjust the information. You can also see any upcoming shows you're attending. With a very user-friendly form, even add the shows, view your settings, show reminders, even export the history. And one thing before we start, yeah, it's a concert tracker, but don't get attached to the concerts. The purpose of this video is really about building an app from start to finish. We have different architecture, so we've decided to use MVVM. Within here, we're also using SwiftData. We have those live searchable texts that we're using with our view models in order to filter, deriving stats instead of storing them, sharing with ShareLink. These are real reusable patterns you'll lift straight into whatever you build next. Encore is just the thing we hang them on. You can build along and then steal every one of them for your own app. And 2 notes to get you through it. Watch in order. Every single chapter starts exactly where the last one ended. In the project on screen here, there's no magic tricks. As long as you follow along, you'll have it in front of you at the very end. And if you're completely brand new to Swift, you don't know about variables, view, or state, I suggest you start with my SwiftUI beginner course, linked below. This one is more intermediate to advanced, as I'll still be explaining everything along the way, but having those foundations under your belt is a great start. And one more thing, this is the part that saves you if you ever get stuck. This whole project is available on GitHub, and I've tagged each one of the chapters as well, so you can reference every single step along the way. So I'll also include that link in the description below, especially if you need to reference the specific code at the end of every chapter. So those tags are your checkpoints. And as you can see from the video time, this is a long build. I'd rather not lose you halfway. So if this is what you came for, subscribe. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive on in. Okay, to get started, because we're working in SwiftUI, we're going to be using Xcode, which you can download completely free from the Apple App Store on your Mac. Once you've installed and opened up Xcode, we're going to be creating a new project from scratch. We're going to be doing the iOS app template. For product name, I'm going to call mine Encore. For your team, you can either be none or your personal development team, organization identifier, whatever you want. I just have mine as com.example, interface, SwiftUI, language Swift, testing system, and storage both on none. Now, as a note, we will be adding persistence with SwiftData later. However, if we were to change this in the dropdown, we would have a different template. We'll then press next, and you can choose where to save it. I also recommend, because this is a large project, you might be coming back to it over a few sessions, is actually creating a Git repository on your Mac, and you can even manage that with services like GitHub later. So let's go ahead and create it. So before we write a single line of code, let's go ahead and actually explore the architecture of our project. Setting up your architecture now is really great for staying organized. We're going to be following what's known as the MVVM pattern, which stands for models, views, view models. So the rule is simple. Models don't know about view models don't know about views. The dependency arrow only points one way, from views down to view models, down to models. If you can't put a file in its group without importing the wrong layer, the architecture is broken. And we'll use folders to really make this visible. So I'm going to right click on our Encore folder in our project navigator on the left here, and I'm going to create a new folder. The first one we'll create are models. Models are pure data, no SwiftUI, no UI kit. I'm going to right click on Encore once again and create another new folder, and we'll create our view models. View models, these are our business logic and state, no SwiftUI layout. The next folder we'll create are the views. So we'll do the exact same thing, right click on Encore, call this one views. Views are layout and gesture handling only, no data fetching. I'm also going to opt to create a fourth folder here, and I'm going to call it resources. This is just a personal habit of mine, and I'll put things like any additional files or even our assets catalog under the resources, just so it's a little bit more organized. So the app we're building today is Encore, which is a concert tracker. It'll have 2 main tabs, attended for shows you've been to, upcoming for shows you want to see, plus a settings tab we'll add later. Each show has an artist, venue, city, date, status, optional rating, notes, and a set list. That's a whole lot of data. And we're going to be holding it under one model. We'll then have two view models, several views, and let's actually start at the bottom of the stack, which is that model. Let's right click on our models folder and we're going to create a new empty file. And we'll call this one show. So this is a Swift file, and this is going to hold pure data. There's going to be no SwiftUI, and for now, no persistence, just the shape of what a show is. We'll make it persistent in the next chapter. Right now, we're just going to define the type. We're going to start off by importing foundation because we're going to be using a date. Then we'll create an enum called ShowStatus. We'll add a brace and we'll have two cases. The first one will be attended and the other case will be upcoming. So a show is either going to be something that you've already been to or one that you're going to be seeing. That single field is what the attended and upcoming tabs filter on. So this way we don't have any separate types or duplicated logic. Now for the model itself, we're going to create a struct called show, capital S, and it's going to conform with our colon to the identifiable. We'll then add our braces. We're going to add 5 fields, and these will kind of represent the minimum of what makes a show a show. So the first one we're going to create is the variable of the artist name, which is a string value because it holds text. The other one will be the venue name, where they played at. We'll also have the city that it took place in. Again, a string value. We'll have another variable of date, which will be that date data type. That's why we had imported foundation, and a variable of status, which would be the show status, that enum. Now we do have an error because it does not conform to the protocol identifiable. So we're going to establish an ID with our let ID to equal the UUID. This way, every time we create a show, it's going to give each show a unique identity the moment it's created. Now when we swap to SwiftData a little bit later on, the framework actually is going to provide that identity for us, and this line will go away. For now, we need to supply it. And a struct actually gives a member-wise initializer for free, so there's no initializer to write. That's all we need to build a layer above it. So our model is done for now. The first view model is next. So we're going to right-click on our view models folder, another empty Swift file, and we'll create the attended ViewModel.swift. So the view model's job is to hold a state that belongs to a screen, not a state that belongs to a view. And that's the distinction. We're going to be creating some search text for the attended screen that belongs to the attended screen, not to any individual cell or button inside of it. Again, we'll start off by importing foundation, and then we'll use the @observable macro. We're marking this as observable so that changes can be tracked. We'll then create our final class, and we'll give it the name of the file, so attended view model, and we'll add our brace. We're going to create 2 variables. The first one will be a search text, and by default it'll equal an empty string, and the other one will be the showing add sheet, which will equal false. It's a Boolean value, so it could be true or false. So we have these 2 state properties here. The search text is going to drive the search bar. Then this showing add sheet controls whether the add show form is presented. Both are screen level state, so they live here in the view model, not the view. Now let's create some filtering logic. So we're going to create a method. To do that, we'll create the func, and we'll call it filtered shows. We're then going to add our brackets, and we'll look at the underscore shows, which is going to conform to an array of show. If you remember what show is, well, that's that model we had created before. Back in the attended view model, we're going to have this return, so we'll do our dash and then our arrow here, an array of show with a capital S once again. We'll add our brace, and we need to essentially take the full list of shows and only return the attended ones, followed by filtering by the search text. So we're going to have a let of attended, and that's going to equal the shows.filter. We can actually use this filter autofill here, and we're going to be looking for the status to double equals, so to check the status to be .attended. We'll then create a guard statement, and we'll look at the exclamation point of the search text .isEmpty, else we'll return attended. Again, we don't want anything that's empty. Finally, we can see here that we have an error that we're missing the return instance. So let's go ahead and add that return now of the attended.filter. Instead of the autofill, we're instead going to have our brace. And we're going to be looking for either the artist name, venue name, or city. Again, in our model right now, those are our 3 string values, so we can search for them with some search text. Back in our view model, we can use the $0.artist_name. So we're going to be looking at that string. Then let's say I'm looking for Radiohead, but I typed it in all caps. Well, we can actually search with the case insensitive. To do that, we'll add another property with the dot, and we'll say localized case insensitive contains. Then within the parameters, we're looking at that search text. Okay, so I can look for the artist name, but what if I want to search for the venue name or the city? Well, we can search for all 3 of those. We can use the OR by doing the shift / on your keyboard to get these 2 straight lines here, which represents OR. So does this filter have the artist name, or let's look at that venue name. So again, $0 dot, and we can use that venue name string dot localized case insensitive search text. We'll do our OR one more time, and this time we'll be looking at the $0.city dot localized. We want the localized case insensitive again of the search text. So we can search for either of those. Now, where that list actually comes from, which will be a live database query, we'll get to that in chapter 4. But the view model doesn't care. It kind of just filters whatever it's handed. And that's the separation. The view supplies the data, the view model then shapes it. And that is the pattern throughout this course. And that's why we're doing MVVM. So our attended view model is done. Upcoming will follow the exact same shape, and we'll build that in chapter 4. The app entry point is next, and that's where the architecture actually gets wired together. So whatever you named your project, in my case Encore, you should have a Swift file that came with it, followed by app. So mine's called Encore app. And this is the entry point, and it has one job today. Put the first screen on the scene. When we handle things like onboarding, we'll be returning to this file. But right now, it's just the window. You can see we have this @main built for us, and this attribute tells Swift that this is where the execution actually starts. We are also importing SwiftUI because we're displaying a SwiftUI view. We then have this app protocol, which gives us the variable body of some scene, followed by a window group. And this is the window that the app lives in, whatever's inside the root view. In this case right now, if we were to run the app, we'd be taken to content view. We're going to actually go to our content view and we're going to rename it, so it makes a little bit more sense. So in your content view, you can right click on the struct name, go to refactor, and rename. Now this will allow us to rename it through code, file names, even comments. So if we select all, we can rename it everywhere that it's referenced. So I'm going to change this to be attended view. You can see the file name will update. Even the reference to it in Encore app is going to be updated within that attended view. In the top right, we can then press rename. So now if we were to open the app, we would first be taken to the attended view. Perfect. Okay, attended view, let's go ahead and press on that. And we're actually going to move it into our view folder, so it's a little bit more clean. Within here, this is where we're going to be showing the first real UI in the app. That entry point owns the scene and nothing else. So our architecture is invisible until something uses it. So let's put that model on the screen. Under our struct of attended view in between the variable body sum view, we're going to create a state private var. And this is going to be our shows, which will conform to an array of show. Again, that custom struct we'd created before, and that'll equal by default an empty array. By default, it's going to be completely empty. We're using state here because this array belongs to this view for now. It holds the shows that we add. Later on, we'll be replacing it with a live database query. All right, and we have this beautiful placeholder of hello world, but we're going to go ahead and delete that all the way up to the V stack. So you should have one opening brace and a second opening brace with some space in between. We'll then add our navigation stack. This way we can have views on top of views and use it for navigation. Within that navigation stack, so we'll add the brace and press return, we're going to add a list. And we're going to be looking at a list of shows, so that private variable above. We'll then add our brace, and we'll look at the show in. We're doing singular because we're going to display each show individually within the list. We'll then display some text, and from here we'll look at the show, again singular, dot, artist name. So this is going to display the artist name. If you wanted to change this to any of the other data, like the venue name, city, or have 3 of those text views, totally up to you. We're going to keep it pretty simple. After the brace of the list, we'll go down and we'll add a .navigation title, and we'll change this to be attended. And now we kind of have this built-in title for free. We'll then use the .toolbar so we can add our button. We'll add a brace after the toolbar, create our button, and we can add some text like add show. We could also choose to include a system image, and because it's a toolbar, it'll probably prefer to use that system image because we don't have a whole lot of space. If you're unfamiliar with the system images and their names, you can do Command-Shift-L and click on the star in the object library. This is actually going to show you and allow you to search for all the available SF symbols. So for mine, I'm going to be doing the plus. We can see with plus, there's tons of different options. However, there is one, if I scroll down here, just called plus. So this name here is what we'd have to put in the string. So we could do our quotation marks and put the plus. We still can't see it because our button needs an action. So let's add our brace, press return, and we'll use the shows.append, which allows us to add new elements to a list. We'll then look at the capital S show, and I'm going to choose the second autofill with the artist, venue, city, date, and status. This way we can kind of fill in the gaps easily. For the artist name, let's go with Radiohead. You can of course put whoever you want. Right now we're kind of hard coding this data. Later on we'll be able to input it properly. The venue, I don't know, Madison Square Garden, which is in New York. For the date, I'm going to set this to be .now, so whatever the current timestamp is, and the status, because we're in the attended view, we'll put it as .attended. So our list show currently works because show is identifiable. That's why that UUID we had added here was included. Back in our view, you'll notice we've hard-coded the values for now, and if we were to press the plus button on the preview, we get Radiohead. But right now, every time we press it, it's Radiohead. Now, you can work in the preview. However, if you want to test and see your changes on the simulator, at the top of Xcode, you should see a simulator option. I think by default, it's actually set to any iOS device. But in this drop-down menu, you can either select your device if you've paired it. I do have a video covering that. I'll put that in the description. Otherwise, you can see your iOS simulators available. And I'm going to choose the iPhone 17. In the top left corner, we then have the build and run the current scheme. We can press this and it'll launch the simulator. Again, because of the app main here, it's going to take us into that attended view. Okay, so here's our attended screen. You'll also notice, hey, where were those 3 instances of Radiohead that we added? Well, we don't have persistence yet, so they don't stay. But otherwise, right now, we can see it, our model on the screen. And that's the architecture working from end to end. A model, a view reading it, and the state driving the UI. Model owns the data, ViewModel owns the logic, although we can't search yet, but we will, and the view just renders. And if we were to restart this app, you'll see that one catch. We have no persistence, which takes us into the next chapter, where we're going to be exploring and turning show into a SwiftData model, where we can wire one modifier into the app, and then these shows survive every single relaunch in every field they need: ratings, notes, and set lists. So if you're ready, let's hop into chapter 2. So as we've seen before, this state private var lives in a state array in memory. Every time we relaunch, we start over. We can even see in the preview, it's back to being blank until we press the add button. This chapter solves that problem, and it's the one that every app hits the first time you close it. So the fix is SwiftData, which is actually one macro on the model, and one modifier in the abstract, and a little bit of change on how the view will read this data. So let's go to our models, and we'll go to our show model. This is where we're going to now be importing SwiftData. So right with our import of foundation, we'll add the import SwiftData. But just adding that doesn't fix it. Above our struct, we're going to use the @model, and this is going to allow us to set our show as a model. However, it cannot be applied to a struct. We need to actually convert this to a class, because when Xcode's compiling this, the macro expands, and it's writing the persistent model to conformance with the schema registration and the observation hooks that SwiftData needs to track changes. And none of that code actually exists in our file, the macro generates it. So we need to swap our structure into a final class. We can also take off the conformance of identifiable, As I mentioned before in the UID down here, the macro automatically generates that ID. So we don't need to manually add it. Now, two things follow from making this a class. First, a class needs an explicit initializer. The struct gave us one for free. And second, now that a show actually persists, we can model the rest of it. The data you add after you've been to the show. Let's add 4 more variables. We'll add the rating, which is an integer value, and we're going to mark this as optional. You don't need to give a show a rating, but a show needs an artist name and a venue name. We can then add another variable of notes, which will be optional of string with that question mark. Again, you don't need those notes. We'll then have the variable of Setlist, which is going to be an array of string, and the variable of created@, which would be a date. So we have 2 optionals, 1 array and 1 timestamp, but let's also add that initializer. After our variables, but still within the braces, we'll type init, and you'll notice we get an autofill for us here. We'll go ahead and add the autofill just to save some time. However, when we have things like the ratings and notes, they're optional. So within the brackets of the initializer, we can actually delete the created@, the setlist, notes, and the rating, keeping those original 5 variables. We can still keep them within this self. However, when we have our optional values, like our rating and notes, they don't need to exist. So instead, we can have those equal nil. Same thing with the set list. We can set this to be an empty array by default. And for the created@, well, we can set the timestamp to be now. This way we can handle our logic. So this initializer is only taking those first 5 core fields. Then we have the ratings, notes, and set list actually default to essentially their empty statuses. Nil, nil, empty array, and created@now. This is a very deliberate choice. The minimum required to create a valid show is artist, venue, city, date, and status. Everything else is going to be optional or derived. The initializer can force that for us. The next few minutes are the kind of why behind these fields, starting with the status enum, which now has to do more work than it did in chapter 1. So if we scroll up to our enum here, we're going to add some conformances. So we'll add our colon. We'll make this string, comma, codable, comma, case iterable. So 3 additions, and I'll give you the 3 reasons why. The string is raw value. SwiftData stores attended and upcoming as readable strings in the database, which are debuggable and stable across schema migrations. A bare enum stores an integer position, which breaks the moment you reorder the cases. We then have codable. This is the framework that serializes the enum to store and deserializes on read. Without it, SwiftData can't round trip the value, and it actually won't compile. Then case iterable. This is for down the road when we have a picker. When we build the add and edit form in a later chapter, we iterate all cases to populate a segmented control. The model knows nothing about the UI, but the conformance lives here, so the compiler knows all cases are enumerable. None of that mattered in chapter 1 when show was a struct living only in memory. Persistence is what turns the enum storage format into a decision you have to make. So 2 of these values are rating and string, as I mentioned, were marked optional with the question mark. You can kind of think of this question mark as a, I don't know, does this exist? Will the user enter a rating? Will the user have notes? A show can exist fully valid with no rating. And nil down here doesn't mean broken, it means not yet. When we build the add and edit, the form will use 0 and empty as string convenient defaults, and the ViewModel will translate those back to nil before they reach the model. We write that code when the form exists. The rule the model encodes today, nil means absent, and absent is a valid state. We then have our set list here, which is an array of string. SwiftData stores arrays of primitive types natively, string, int, double, bool. If the element is primitive, SwiftData handles the serialization. You don't write anything extra. And the set list is going to start empty. Songs can get added later through the add or edit form, and the order will be preserved. SwiftData maintains array order as well. And before we move on, I just want to be very thorough. Why are we using final class? This is a choice that surprises most people. SwiftUI has often taught us to prefer structs, value semantics, copy on assignment. So why does this model require a class? Because SwiftData actually tracks objects by identity. So let's say we change a show's venue, add a song, every part of the app holding that show has to see the same mutation. Just as a reminder, structs copies, so two views would hold their own copy and an update wouldn't reach the other. That class has one stable identity the framework can observe and propagate. The final seals it. Subclassing conflicts with how the macro generates schema metadata. We have one model type, one schema entry, and the rule is that model always means final class. Everything else in the app can stay a struct. Okay, I know we covered a lot here with our model, but I just wanted to be very thorough with SwiftData. Now let's go back to our app entry point. So for me, it's Encore app. And right now it's just showing the attended view and nothing in it knows that SwiftData exists. So let's also import SwiftData into this file as well. After our window group, so we're going to go to the brace below that, we're going to do the .ModelContainer. From there, we'll be looking at the for show.self. So this one modifier is kind of our entire persistence stack. SwiftData handles the store location, migration, and context management. It takes a type, in this scenario show.self, and infers the schema from every app model reachable from it. One model today. When the app grows, you could actually pass an array within this for. But the store being wired doesn't mean that attended view uses it. It still reads the memory in the @state array. So let's go to our attended view and let's update that. Once again, we'll be importing SwiftData. And we're going to be changing this state. We're going to go ahead and delete it and instead add an @query. And we'll once again have it be a private var of shows conforming to an array of show. Then we'll use the @environment. We'll then add our brackets and we'll do the \model_context. We'll also call this private var and we're going to call it model context. So the query is going to read live from the store. Every saved show is kept in sync. When the data changes, the view re-renders itself, just like a state private var. Then we have our environment. This is going to pull the context the container injected. That's what we write through. So we need to make some changes in our button. You can see here we have a whole bunch of errors, but it's actually really quick to fix. We're going to go to our shows.append and we're going to replace that. Instead, we're going to do the ModelContext.insert. And then we're going to insert the exact same model. So instead of appending to an array, we insert into the context. SwiftData then saves it and query sees it instantly. No manual refresh. Now, something with SwiftData you'll notice is it doesn't do a great job of saving between the preview. So in order to save, we're going to be launching it in the simulator. So once again, select your device. I'll do iPhone 17 and we're going to run it in the simulator and we can see that persistence. Okay, here we are in the simulator. I'm going to press the add button. Now, if we want to relaunch the app, you can either go and press the pause button on Xcode, or in the simulator, you can double press on the home button and swipe up the app to delete it. Once you've done that, you can select the app from the home screen, and there we go. Our Radiohead attended is there. The model knows what a show is, the container knows how to store it, and then finally query reads it. The context writes it, and those responsibilities still stay separate. So we've essentially used both halves of SwiftData's View API. So let's name them. @query reads, which is a live wire to the store of environment of the model context, which writes, inserts, deletes, saves, whatever you need. You never create a context. There's one per container, and you receive the existing one. One rule that really pays off later is our view models. They actually never store the context. When a view asks a view model to delete something, it passes its context in as a parameter. So we have the environment, which then goes to the view, and then the view model. The view model owns logic, never the SwiftData stack. That's what keeps it testable. You can create one with no store behind it. So something I mentioned before is our preview. Oof, what's going on with our preview? Well, it's a little bit difficult to use SwiftData for. The SwiftUI previews actually need a container, but we don't want that preview data actually touching the production store. We want previews to also be fast. So the solution is a container configured for in-memory only storage. In our show model here, we're also going to import SwiftUI. But we're not going to be touching any more of the model code. Instead, we're going to go to the very, very bottom. We'll add a hashtag preview. We'll add our brace. And this is where we're going to add a configuration. So we'll do the let config to equal the model configuration. Definitely use a lot of the autofill here. And we're going to use the is stored in memory only, and we'll set this to be true. Then we'll establish the container to equal the try exclamation point of the model container. And we're going to have the for, and we're going to have the second option here with the migration plan and configurations. So the for, we're going to be setting this to be the show.self. And for the configurations, we're going to set that to be that config we just created above. Then we'll create a sample. And this sample is going to be that show. And if you really want to, you can fill it in with different data, or you can copy and paste the one from before with Radiohead or whatever you decided to choose. After the sample, we'll add the container dot main context, and we'll insert, and we're going to be inserting that model that we just created called sample. Then we'll need to return, and we'll have some text here of the sample dot artist name, and we'll use the dot model container and pass through that container. So now we can see we have that sample data. If you want to add multiple shows, you can. But now, because we've set the is stored in memory to be true in the configuration, the container is real. We have full SwiftData behavior, real queries, real observation. The only difference is that it lives in memory and disappears when the preview stops. No file on disk, and no leftover data between preview runs. The reason we're using the try exclamation point is acceptable in preview code. Previews aren't shipping code. If the container fails, a crash is the right signal. It means the schema is wrong. And the great thing is, the view previews onwards, we can actually use the shorthand for the same thing. So if we were to go to our attended view, scroll down to our preview, we can add the dot model container. From here, we can say for, it'll be the show.self, as well as the in memory, we'll set that to be true. Now, when we press the plus button, it'll actually save, and we can see that the SwiftData and adding that entry, so in this case, the Radiohead show, will work. So same behavior, but way less typing. Now you know what it's doing under the hood. So the model is done. The container is wired, and next we're going to be taking a look at navigation. The tab bar and the navigation stack, every view will live inside. So currently our app only has one page. We have the attend view, but we can't navigate anywhere else. Not too many apps exist where it's just one page, so let's go ahead and explore navigation. We're going to start off by creating a new tab view so we can use the tab at the bottom of the screen to navigate between separate views. We're going to right click on our views folder, and this time we're going to choose new file from template. From here, we'll make sure we're on the iOS template, and under user interface, or you can filter in the top right, we're going to create a new SwiftUI view. Now something you'll notice that I do is when I name my view models, I put the view model as the suffix, same thing with the views. So we're going to call this one main tab view, and we'll hit create. Now with this main tab view, and when we have the template, we actually get some additional code. I'm going to comment off our preview for now and remove the text of hello world. So essentially we just have the structure and the variable body of some view. Now we need to actually declare that tab view. We can do so by typing out tab view, the capital T and V, and then we're going to add a brace. And this is where all of our tabs are going to go at the bottom of our screen. So we can create each tab by declaring it as such with capital T tab, and then we're going to include a label, which is a string, and then a system image, which are those SF symbols. So I'm going to handle the first tab, which is the attended. We can then add a comma after the string and include our system image. You can do the Command-Shift-L for the object library and find your strings. I already know which ones I want to add, and I'm going to be adding the music.mic. And here's what it looks like in the SF symbol, but we'll see it on the screen soon enough. After the brackets, we're going to add our brace so we can tell SwiftUI, okay, when I press on this tab, I want to go to this view. And we're going to be going to the attended view with the empty parameters. Now, while we're here, we can add our other screens. Just note they will throw an error until they exist, but we can create them now. So we're going to create another one for upcoming. We'll use that system image. And for this one, I'm going to do the calendar, ladder brace, and we're going to go to the upcoming view. Once again, we will get that error. Don't worry, we'll fix it later. We're going to have one more tab for our settings. And I'm going to use the system image of gear for this one. And we'll add a brace, and this will take us to the settings view with the empty parameters. So for our tab, we have our label first, and then our system image second. Then everything that belongs to this tab kind of lives within the block. We have no modifier hunting. So each tab actually needs its own navigation stack, not one navigation stack wrapping the tab view. There's one inside each tab. If we were to put a navigation stack outside a tab view, all three tabs would share a single navigation stack. Navigating and attend would push onto the same stack as upcoming, and that's a huge design flaw that we just removed from navigation view. So we can quickly fix those errors by just creating some temporary views. Once again, we're going to right click on our views folder, new file from template, SwiftUI view, and we'll name them the exact same we did in the code. So let's create that settings view. And just for testing, instead of the text saying hello world, we'll just have it say something like settings, so we know that we've navigated. And then we also need our upcoming view. So I'll right click, new file from template, next, and we'll do the upcoming view. And we can press create. Once again, we'll just have it say upcoming view. Now, if we were to launch this app, as we can see in our app entry point, we'd still be going to the attended view, which is that main page. But if we want to be able to see the tab view, we actually need to boot into the tab view again, which we had called main tab view. So let's go ahead and swap that up. And now we can give a quick run of our app on the simulator. As a reminder, this window group is the scene. Every view in the app actually descends from it. That's why the model container still goes here and not on the main tab view and not on the attended view itself. The window group is the right level. Again, it's at the end of that brace, one container for the whole app. And when our app loads, we're still taken to the attended because it is the first tab on our main tab view. So whatever is first here is what we'll be booting into, and then in order, upcoming and settings. So if we were to press on these tabs, we can just see if we have the upcoming view and the settings. Right now, they're just used for placeholders, but we can freely navigate between all three of these screens. So that's our tab navigation. So 3 tabs, independent stacks, and 1 model container. Attend and upcoming will actually each push a detailed view later on in their own stack. So this is our basic navigation architecture. Next, we're going to be exploring list and search. Now, before we go ahead and create our list, let's quickly go back to the attend view. I want to talk about query for just a little bit longer. Query is a property wrapper that lives in your view, not in the view model, in the view. And it subscribes to SwiftData's model container through SwiftUI's environment. When anything in the store changes, anything writes, deletes, or updates, the query sees it and tells the view to redraw. That's why the list will update automatically when we're going to add a show. You don't have to call a reload function, you don't post notification, and you don't publish a @published array. Query is watching the store at all times, and SwiftUI reacts. The reason that it has to live within the view is because it actually uses this environment model context we added right under it, under the hood. Property wrappers that depend on SwiftUI's environment only work as stored properties in a view. You can't put a query in plain Swift class. It has no environment to connect to. So let's go ahead and go back to our attended view model we had created. And we wrote this back in chapter 1. Here's where it stands. We have our observable, 2 pieces of UI state, the search text and add sheet, and our filtered show function. And this takes the array @query, then hands the view and returns only the attended shows filtered by search. Something we're going to be adding, since we've added SwiftData, is a import at the top of our attended view model of SwiftData. And we're actually going to add a function to delete within the class. So after our filtered shows here, and you can always double click on the brace to find out where you need to go. Otherwise, it should be one above the final brace. And we're going to add that method. So we'll do func delete. And this is going to take the underscore show, which conforms to the show, not the array. And we'll also have some context here, which will be the model context. Basically, we're saying when we delete, we want to make sure that we're using the context of that kind of save container we've set up before. We'll add our brace, and you're going to be shocked at how easy it is to delete. We're going to reference the context, .delete, and we're going to pass through the show. And that's it. So it'll take a show and a model context, then calls context.delete. The view model doesn't own the context. The view owns it via environment and then passes it in. That's what keeps this view model free of any SwiftUI dependency and trivially testable. And you may also be thinking, okay, but why are we filtering the shows here instead of a predicate on query? Well, we could push it to the database. For a personal concert log that'll never have millions of rows, it doesn't really matter. Filtering in Swift is fast and keeps logic easy to read and test. A music app with tens of millions of tracks would probably push that to the predicate. So now let's head on back over to our attended view. So we're actually going to update this query. So after the @ query, we're going to add a bracket here. And this is where we're going to be sorting. And we'll use our backslash of the capital show .date. So we can sort it by the date. We'll then add a comma, and we can then declare the order. And I'm going to set this to be .reverse. And just for a bit of clarity, I'm going to right click on shows, and I'm going to rename this just so it's a little bit more clear to be all shows instead. With a little bit of camel case. We can hit rename. It'll read a lot more clearly later on. We're also going to have the view model be owned by state. So after our @environment, we'll add the @state private var, and we'll call it view model, which would equal the attended view model with the empty brackets. So this @state is going to give SwiftUI ownership of the instance. If we were to actually just declare this as a plain variable of view model, SwiftUI wouldn't know how to preserve it across any view updates. So this state here helps keep it alive and stable. So currently our searchable text is actually going to be taking a binding of string, but the view model is owned by state. If we were to try to use $viewModel.searchText, it actually won't compile. @state on an observable doesn't project bindings the same way it does to value types. So in the variable body of some view, we're actually going to add the @bindable. And we'll call it var of VM to equal the view model. So this @bindable is not a new instance. It's actually a bindable projection of the same object that state is holding. From here, inside the body, if we were to use the search text, we can actually get the binding, and our view model stays single instance. The next thing we need to do is what happens when we have an empty state. Right now, we don't have any shows displaying in our list. Well, we can use a group to switch between two states without ever repeating all the navigation modifiers, whether that's an empty state or a list. So we're actually going to wrap this list here in the group. So we'll create our group, add our opening brace, and after the closing brace of the list, we'll add another closing brace. Then within this group, we're going to add an if statement. So we can say, okay, if the view model dot filtered shows, and then we'll be looking at the all of the shows that we just renamed. And if this is empty, so we'll do that is empty, we'll go ahead and create another view here. So what do we want to display if it's empty? Well, we can build a custom view, or we can simply use the content unavailable view. And we can pass through things like a title, image, and description. So we can say something like no results. And as a little image, we can grab that from the SF symbol library. So maybe we'll do the magnifying glass. Oh, and we'll just need to replace that to be system image instead of image there. Just a placeholder for now. Now currently it's a little bit broken because our list is always going to be displaying. So let's go ahead and add an else. So when there is content, we can go ahead and wrap that list in the else. So let's go ahead and give it a test. Currently our list is empty. If we were to press the plus button and add one, we only see the list. That's the power of the group and the if and else. If it's empty, display this, otherwise display our list. Now we can add that delete action. we just need to update our list a little bit more. So currently we have our list, and then we're just going through all shows and displaying the text. Let's go ahead and amplify that a little bit more. So I'm going to delete our list. We'll then add the list again, but this time we'll add a brace, and we'll use the for each to actually loop through all the data. In our for each, we'll look at our ViewModel.filtered shows, and we'll be looking through all of these shows. We'll then add our brace, and we'll have our show in. Then we'll look at the text. From here, we'll look at the show dot, and we can grab any information we want, maybe the artist name. Again, we'll build this out to be a lot better later on. So now when we add it, we still see the artist's name. Then we'll go outside the for each. So we'll go down one brace here, and we'll do the dot on delete. We'll then add a brace because we're going to have our custom logic, and we'll be looking at the index set in. Then we'll let our shows equal the ViewModel dot filtered shows for all of the shows. Then for the index within the index set, we'll add a brace one more time, and this is where we're going to look at the ViewModel dot delete. And what are we deleting? Well, we're going to be deleting the shows. We're going to add our square brackets of the index, and then for the context, we're going to be using that model context. So how does this work? And why are we calling filtered shows again inside this onDelete instead of using a cached array? Well, this is because @query can update between the for each rendering and the delete gesture completing. Recalling filtered shows inside of onDelete means that the index is always fresh against the current array. If you capture it earlier, you can actually get an index mismatch and crash. So let's go ahead and add Radiohead. And by default with lists on iOS, we can swipe to the left to delete. So we can add a few of these instances. Let's delete this first one, then the second one. Also, if you only swipe partially, you'll kind of have this little delete with the trash can built in, very user-friendly right out the gates. Now I mentioned we're also going to be handling search. I'm also going to give our code a little bit more room here. So we can use the .searchable in order to add a search bar very easily. So after our navigation title and before our toolbar, let's add the .searchable. And we can see with the first option, we have the text, placement, and prompt. Let's go ahead and do the autofill here, and it actually only gives us the text for now. So what should we put for the text? Well, as I mentioned before, when we had this at Bindable, we created it for the view model. So we're going to use our $vm.searchText. Then we can include the prompt for the user. And we can say something like artists, venues, and cities, because that's what they can search for. So we have our search bar that's currently in the bottom of the screen. However, when we actually boot the app, you might be thinking, wait a second, wasn't there a tab bar at the bottom of the screen? Also, this is a text field and you can type in it. When you do press it, it does kind of take a little bit over the view. You'll notice that our toolbar at the top is kind of gone, and we now have this X to kind of cancel out. So I want to show you what happens when our search bar without a tab view currently lives at the bottom of the screen and we run it in the simulator. You'll notice it now moves to right above our list where we currently have Radiohead. Let's go ahead and delete it. We can see our no results. As a note, on the simulator, you can press Command K to bring up the iOS keyboard, or you can type with your Mac keyboard. So I'm going to search for an artist that doesn't exist here. I'm going to do deadmau, and we can see no results. But DE is available in Radiohead. We have the D and the E both in that string. Again, we can search, but if I were to do Radio Z, of course not a band, maybe there is, I don't know, it's not going to actually appear. So that is our search function. Radiohead is also currently tagged to be in the city of New York, and although it's not currently displaying, because that information is part of the venue, it will show up in the search. And again, we have this little X to clear, or the little X to kind of take us out of that search function. And again, just to show off the delete, we can do that as well, and then we have our empty state. We'll be making this look way, way better in the future as well. Okay, but what about our plus button? Right now, every time we press it, it's just bringing up Radiohead, but our view model is actually controlling the sheet for us. Let's go ahead and explore flipping that sheet value to be true. So let's stop running our app. We can also close the console down here, and let's change our button. Right now, it's using the model context to insert just base information, kind of this hard-coded data. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this model context, And instead, we're going to look at our view model dot showing add sheet, which we've already created before, and that would actually flip it to be true. Well, now we need to actually present that sheet. So let's go outside of our toolbar. So we're going to go down those braces. And let's add the dot sheet. Now this sheet is going to allow us to do a little bit of almost navigation where we can actually have a sheet pop up. So we're going to add our bracket and we're going to do the is presented. So how are we going to know when to present this sheet? Well, it's going to be based off the binding of vm.showingAddSheet. We'll then add a brace. What content do we want to show? Well, it doesn't exist yet, but we're going to be having our add edit show view here. So let's go ahead and declare that now. We'll do the add edit show view. Then let's go ahead and right click on our view. We'll create a new file from template. We'll create a new SwiftUI view and we're going to give it the exact same name. So add edit show view. We'll hit create. This will resolve the error and we're just going to use the placeholder for now. So instead of the text of hello world, we'll say add content here. We'll navigate back to our attended view. Let's go ahead and refresh our preview and see what happens now when we press the plus button. When we press the plus button, instead we get this sheet that pops up. And by default, the user can actually drag this sheet, move it down, and kind of swipe it all the way down to dismiss. So in the future of our app, this will actually allow us to add those custom shows. But for now, we're just using that placeholder. So our app's already evolved. We have a lot of information in place, but we still need to continue to build out our app. So we're at a crossroads of what we can continue to develop. I'm going to opt to actually create a show row view because our list currently works, but we're going to give each row its own file. This way the user can press on the row and get more information. So let's right click on our views folder, create another new file from template, another view, and we're going to call this one ShowRowView. Wonderful. Okay, in our ShowRowView, we can remove the placeholder text of hello world. And for our imports, we're just going to be leaving this as SwiftUI for now. After our structure, we're going to establish the show. So we'll say let show : S show, referencing that class. Now we are going to have an error in our preview for a while. You have a couple choices. You can either delete it or you can add some filler information. To add filler information, you can click on the error and you can do insert show and hit apply. Now for this placeholder show, you'll want to add things like the artist name, menu, etc., etc. So I'm just going to add the artist, go real quick. This way, as we add information, we can also see it in the preview on the right side. So let's go ahead and design our view. And because the show is a let, it's actually read-only. The row is not going to mutate data, rather it'll display it. So in our variable body SumView, let's go ahead and add a VStack. I'm going to add some alignment here as well, just because we want it to be perfect. And I'm going to have this be leading, and we'll add a little bit of spacing. Let's do 4. We'll then add our brace, and we're going to have the text of the show.artistName. Now you'll see in our preview, we can see what each one of these rows will look like. We can also adjust things like font to give it headline. A lot of this is arbitrary. If you want to customize yours more, feel free to do so. So this is our primary label. We'll then add an H-stack here. I'm also going to include some spacing. I'm going to keep it the same spacing as our V-stack just for consistency. In this H-stack, we can add some more text like the show.venue name. We can then add some more text, and I'm going to add a little kind of dot here, or a dash if you'd like, just so we can then put the text of the show.city. So to me, that says, okay, we have the name kind of at that headline, it's a little bit more bolded, the Coca-Cola Arena in Toronto. Now, if you want to, in SwiftUI, you can actually apply modifiers to all the views within a stack. So at the end brace of our H stack, let's add the font of subheadline. And then we'll add some foreground style of secondary. So dot secondary. And that's going to apply to all of those text views. So now it's like a little bit more grayed out. It's not as relevant information. The headliner with that artist name definitely is going to draw that attention in. After our foreground style, let's add one more H stack. And we're going to add some text here, which is going to have the show.date. And we're going to be using the dot formatted for this one, because otherwise you'll see the formatting, it does an okay job, but I don't always find it's the most human readable. Instead, within our four brackets, we're going to add our date, colon, then we can use the dot abbreviated, comma, time, and we'll go ahead and omit that. I don't think most people are like, yeah, I went to this concert at 6:37. You know, they're mostly just looking for that date, the day, month, and year. We can style this text even more, so I'm going to add some font here and just make it caption. And then the foreground style, we can also set this one to be secondary. So again, this is a concert log, not a calendar, so we've omitted the time, but the abbreviated format gives us that June 15, 2026. Or whatever day it is for you. So if you remember in our model of show, we have the rating, which is actually nil because it's optional. So not every show has to be rated. If it exists, we can actually render some stars. So back in our ShowRowView, still within the H stack of the show date, after this text, let's go ahead and have an if let. So if this exists, so the rating equals the show.rating. We can then add our brace. I'm going to add a spacer here, and then we'll add an H stack. We can include some spacing, and I'm going to set this to be real small, like 2. We'll then add a brace and a for each, so we can loop through this data. So we'll do a range of 1.5. Then we'll include the ID, which will just be the \self. We can then add our brace and we'll do a star in. So these are going to be our star ratings. Now, because it's optional and our preview currently doesn't have the rating, we won't see any stars. We can fix this in the preview though. We'll add our image and we'll use the system name here. And for the star, it's just called star. However, you'll notice I don't actually have this in a string. We're going to be using a ternary operator to declare whether it's filled or unfilled. So if our value of star is less than or equal to the rating, we'll have a ternary operator, which is our question mark. We'll then say, okay, if that's the case, it'll be star.fill, else it'll just be star. And these are, again, our SF symbols. We can then apply some style, so we'll add some font of caption, and we can even do caption 2, and we can add some foreground style. Again, we'll look at the value of star, and if that is less than or equal to the rating, do a ternary operator rating. Again, we'll have the color.yellow, so it'll fill those in with yellow, else the color will be secondary. So color.secondary, so more grayed out. Okay, one more thing I'm going to add is at the end of our V stack here, so I'm going to double click on this brace. I'm actually going to add just a little bit of padding, so we'll do a dot padding, and I'm going to set this to actually be dot vertical of a value of 2, just to give all those elements slightly more breathing room vertically. Currently, we can't see our stars, and if we were to go down to the preview and add a comma, you'll notice rating doesn't appear, and if we were to add 4, it's going to throw us an error. So this is because in our initializer of show here, you'll notice that it's not within the first 5 rows, and when we have the self, it's actually set to be nil and optional. So there are a few ways to get it to show in the preview. So you can create your own custom show and then set the rating. So we would import SwiftData, and then I'll just show you with a paste of what that would look like. So down here, we would have a separate preview of the rated row. So you can totally pause and copy and paste and adjust it if you'd like. And now if we were to go to that rated row, we can see, I'll zoom in a little bit, we have those stars. So 4 out of 5 are highlighted. If we were to change this to be a 5-star show, or even a 1-star show, you'll notice that these stars update. So a lot more work if you do want to preview the stars. Again, because they're not required in our initializer, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So for now, this is our show row. So now we need to hook this up into our attended view. So back in our attended view, currently we're just kind of listing through the for each, and we actually don't have a way to navigate to this show row. So within our list and for each, we're actually going to delete the text of showing the artist name. And for the show in, we're actually going to be using the navigation link, and we need a value. Well, that value is going to be that particular show. We'll add a brace, and then we'll have our ShowRowView, and we'll pass through the show of whatever show that is in lowercase. This way, when we populate the list, we'll be able to press it and get more detail about that show. So this navigation link with the value of show, and then displaying the ShowRowView, for each one of the shows that we add, it'll have that little detail with the artist name, the venue date, and the stars. So we can see everything at a glance, press on it, and then be taken to the detail view. And this navigation link right here with the value of show actually works really, really well with the navigation destination. So let's go ahead and create that. So we're going to scroll down, and after our .searchable, so in between the searchable and toolbar, and we're going to do the .navigationDestination. Now we're going to choose the for option. Now this wants a hashable .type and then a destination. Well, we're using SwiftData, so we can use the show.self. Then for a destination, we're going to remove the stub here, and instead we're going to add our brace, and this is where we're going to eventually go to the show detail view. So we'll press on something and be taken to a view that has all the details about the show. The only other thing we need to add is the show in, just like our for each. Now we still have a lot of work to do, but we now have a view that's searchable. When we add our list items, they'll be displayed, and eventually we'll also be able to navigate to them. All right, so our attended view model is quite large. Let's go ahead and handle the upcoming tab. As I mentioned, this is going to follow the kind of same pattern as attended. So let's go ahead and build it. In our view models, let's right click and create a new empty file. And we'll call this one the upcoming view model. Similar to the other one, we'll import foundation and import SwiftData. It's also going to be @observable, and we're going to create a final class of upcoming view model. We'll add a brace, and for this one, we're going to have a variable of showing add sheet. And by default, this is actually going to be false as well. We can then create our method of filtered shows. We'll add a bracket underscore shows, conforms to an array of show, and then we'll return the array of show. We'll add our brace. We'll then look at our shows, so multiple, and we'll use the dot filter. And we'll add our brace of our $0 dot status, and we'll double check, so double equals that it's dot upcoming instead of attended. Then we can use the dot sorted. Again, we'll add our brace $0 dot, and we'll be looking at the date. This will be less than $1 dot date. Then we'll add our function to delete. So underscore show, comma, and honestly, you can probably just copy and paste this one if you wanted to, comma, of the context of the model context. We'll add a brace, and we'll have the context dot delete that specific show. So we have one piece of UI state, which is the showing add sheet. No search text because there's no search here. The filtered shows keeps only upcoming shows and sorts them the soonest first. The next concert you're going to is at the top, and the same delete method taking the context from the view. So this is the whole view model. Now let's create that view. We had already created this with the kind of placeholder text here, so we can remove that text, and we're going to be adding the import of SwiftData. Under the structure, because we're using SwiftData, we're going to add our query, environment, and state. So let's start off with the query, and we're going to be doing the sort again. We'll do our \S show dot date. Then we'll have our private var of all shows, which conforms to the show. We'll have our @environment. You'll notice with a lot of SwiftData, we kind of just follow a similar pattern, right? We have our environment model context, private var of model context, and then we'll do our @state private var to hold our view model, which will equal the upcoming view model with the empty brackets. So we have the three properties identical pretty much to attend. Query sorts them ascending this time, the soonest date first, because upcoming shows read best in the order that they'll happen. Okay, let's go ahead and build our view. We'll once again have our @bindable. And this is going to be our var of VM, which equals that ViewModel. We'll then have a navigation stack, and then a group. So we can do our cheat like we did last time. So if the ViewModel dot filtered shows, we're going to be looking for all shows, dot is empty, we'll add our brace, and we'll display that content unavailable view. We'll say no upcoming shows. For our image, let's once again do that system image. What do we want to do for this one? We can do calendar. There we go. Else, in the case that they do have shows, we'll add our brace. We'll do a list and a for each. Again, it's going to feel very similar to our attended. In our for each, we're going to look at the view model, and we'll do the dot filtered shows for all shows. We'll add a brace. We'll have the show in. Create some space here. We'll have our navigation link. We'll have the value be show. Add a brace, and we'll have our ShowRowView. And we'll be passing through that lowercase show. We'll go down 2 braces, so after our for each on delete. Honestly, you probably could just copy and paste a lot of it, but you know, it's good to good to get some practice. We'll add a brace after our on delete, and we'll be looking at the index set in. We'll establish our shows, so let shows to equal the view model dot filtered shows for all shows. Then we'll have a for index in the index set. Add our brace, we'll look at the view model dot delete. We'll pass through the shows and the array of index. And for the context, well, that's just our model context with the lowercase m here, because we're referencing the variable from up top. Now there's a few more things to add. Let's double click on the left brace of our group. And after that brace, we're going to add our navigation title of upcoming. We'll also add our navigation destination. This is for later. Again, we'll want the for, and this is for the show.self. That destination, once again, will be custom. It doesn't exist yet, but we can still add our show in, and then we'll just add our comment, show detail view. We'll add that later. We can also add our toolbar. So dot toolbar, we'll add our brace, and we'll actually use the toolbar item this time, so we have more control over the placement. And I'm going to have this be the dot primary action. We can then add our brace, and we can add the button again with the text of add show, but we'll add our comma and also have our system image here. And that will just be plus. We'll add our brace, and whenever we press it, we'll have our view model dot showing add sheet to flip to be true. We'll go down 3 braces here. So after the toolbar, oh, sorry, the toolbar item, that's a lowercase b. My apologies there if you're following along. Just the I and T are capital there. So down 3 braces, we'll do the dot sheet. And this is going to be is presented based off of the binding, so $VM dot showing add sheet. We'll then add a brace, and this sheet that's going to appear is that add edit show view. There we go. We had created it earlier. I think it's just blank right now though. Just a blank sheet. So we can press the button and we still get that edit action. Now in the preview, if you also want to use that SwiftData, you can attach that ModelContainer for the show.self, comma, in memory set to be true. So if this looks familiar, that's the point. We have the same group up here, the same kind of empty state. We'll improve that later, but we have the same empty state for now. Navigation link on delete. The only thing that's different, again, and this is my design choice, is that there's no searchable modifier. And for the add sheet, what we'll be doing later is we'll actually be passing through a parameter to set the initial status to be upcoming. So we still have a lot of work to do on our app, but we've at least populated our attended and upcoming sheets. And when we do populate it with data, the data will look so clean and we'll soon be able to navigate to each show's information page. So we're going to move on to chapter 5. So we have our upcoming show and our attended, but when we press the plus button, it just says add content here. We've put in all this work to have our list and those custom views, but we don't have data and we don't have a way to save the data currently to display it. We have that edit show view here, but it's quite empty. So before we add to the view, let's go ahead and add a new view model. So we'll create a new empty file in our view models and we'll call it add edit show view model. Quite the mouthful. Okay, let's go ahead and do our imports. We're gonna do SwiftData and Foundation. So this view model has one job. It's gonna hold the forms fields, populate them from an existing show or sensible defaults, and write them back on save. Because let's say I wanted to go back and edit a show, it kind of needs to be able to be editable, right? So we're gonna create the @observable and the final class of add edit show view model. We'll then add our brace. So we're going to handle our field storage first. One mutable property per form field plus a working new setlist entry for when we add songs for the add song row, because we're going to have setlists in our app too. Okay, so let's create our variables. If you really wanted to, you could probably grab most of these from the show model. We'll just type them out really quickly because we're going to have things like the artist name, and by default it'll be an empty string, variable of venue name, again empty string by default, same thing with the city, the date. Instead we'll have equal the date with a capital D and empty brackets. We can also have the variable of status, which will conform to that show status enum we made in chapter 1. And by default, we'll have it be .upcoming. Don't worry, when we call upon the sheet, we're going to be updating that show status. So depending on what view you're calling it from, we'll flip that to the proper status. We'll then have our variable of rating, which will be an integer, and by default, it'll be 0. Again, just kind of think of what all these variables would be if they were blank. So our notes would equal an empty string. The variable of setlist conforms to an array of string, and by default, that's an empty array. And a variable new setlist entry would also be an empty string. Oof, okay. Now we're going to create a validation, which will be a computed property. This way we can have artist and venue as the only required fields, and we can actually use not empty after trimming. So we're going to create a variable is valid, which is going to conform to a bool, and then we'll add our brace. So we're going to use our exclamation point for opposite, and we'll have our artist name dot trimming characters in. We'll use the dot white spaces, and we'll check the dot is empty status. We can then check the and by doing the double ampersand. So we're checking for the artist name to make sure it's not empty. And we also check for the venue name to make sure it's not empty. Again, so we're basically saying if the artist name is not empty and the now venue name dot trimming characters in the white spaces dot is empty, then it's a valid form. Otherwise, the user won't be able to submit without the artist and venue name at the very least. Okay, now we need the initializer, and this is the decision point. So outside the braces of our variable is valid, but still within the class, we're gonna do our init. And if we were to press return here, we have most of what we want, but we'll definitely need to make some changes. So what I'd recommend doing is Command Z to undo that, and instead we're gonna type it out. So we want to initialize the show, which would be the capital S show. We'll use our question mark equals nil. We'll add a comma, and we'll have our initial status. As I mentioned, when we're going to be calling upon this sheet, we're going to say, okay, if we're calling it from upcoming, mark it as upcoming. If we're calling it from attended, mark it as such. So this will conform to the show status, and that'll equal dot upcoming. We'll then add our brace. So as I mentioned, this is kind of our decision point. Show is actually optional. If it's set to nil, that means we're adding a show. It doesn't exist yet. If we have a real show already, when we call upon this sheet, Well, that has to mean this already existed before, therefore we're editing. So we'll create an if-let of the show. So if this exists, we'll have our artist name, and we're going to have the same kind of pattern here of show.artistName. We'll then have the venue name, show.venueName. You can kind of see the pattern that we're going through here. So I'm just going to quickly just add everything pretty much as the that equals the show.that. So date equals show.date. Now we do need to be careful though with the rating because there are something that's optional. And we're going to have the show.rating, and we can use our double question marks, our nil coalescing operator, to then add a value. So we'll put 0, no rating. We'll then have our notes. Again, that was optional. So show.notes, our double question mark of an empty string. We can then include our setlist to equal the show.setlist. Outside of our if-let, we'll then create an else, and we'll add a brace. We can then look at the status to equal the initial status. Then we'll have our date to equal the initial status, and we'll double equals to dot attended, and we'll do our ternary operator for now, else with our colon, and this is where we're going to be using the calendar. So we'll do our capital C calendar dot current, then we'll do the dot date by adding the value. So by adding what? Well, we're going to do a day, the value of 7, so 7 days, which is a week, to dot now. We'll then add our nil coalescing operator to kind of default back to now. Okay, tons of code here. So the one if let show here branch, do you have a show? Copy every field out of it. If you don't, so that else, set the status from the past in default and calculate a smart default date a week from now. Attended shows can default to today and upcoming default to a week out. That symmetry is the whole architecture of the chapter. But we're not quite done. We need to add a couple functions. As I mentioned, we probably want to be able to save this. As well as we have our set list that we still want to add to. Let's go down right before the very last brace here, and let's add the function to add the setlist and then save. So we'll create the method here, so func add setlist. And let's call it add setlist entry actually, our empty brackets. We'll add a brace, and we'll have our let trimmed equal the new setlist entry dot trimming characters in, and we'll have that be in the dot white spaces. We'll then use our guard, and we'll use our exclamation point to look at the opposite of trimmed dot is empty, else we'll go ahead and return. We'll then have our setlist dot append the trimmed. Then our new setlist entry will equal a blank string. So we're essentially like kind of clearing it, right? So we trim it, we then say, okay, as long as it's not empty, we're good to go. We'll then add it to the list, and then we'll reset the new setlist entry to be a blank string. So if I were to add Radiohead, it wouldn't then immediately in the next column also still be displaying Radiohead. Well, I guess it's a song, but you know what I mean. Okay, now we want to save. So we'll add that method and we'll call it save. Makes sense. We're going to be saving to the context of the capital M model context. We'll then add a comma and look for the existing show, which is going to conform to the capital S show marked optional equals nil. We can then add our brace. And this is going to look very familiar to our initializer. We're going to do our if let of show, we'll add our brace, and this time we're going to be looking at the show dot. In this case, artist name will equal the artist name. Well, very similar to what we did before, the venue name, the dot city, the date. Definitely use the autofill, like the predictive coding should be pretty good at helping you with this one. Now, what about the status? Well, it's just going to equal the status. Same thing with the rating, except we'll have the less than 0 for here. We'll use our ternary operator to display the rating, else it'll be nil. For our notes, so show.notes, it's going to equal the notes.isEmpty ternary operator nil, else notes. We'll have our show.setlist, which will then just equal that setlist. And because we have an if let, let's go ahead and add our else. So if we already have the show, there we go. If we already have the show, that's our handler. Else, if we have a new show, we'll let the new show to equal the capital S show. And you can actually use the autofill here. And for the autofill, it's a little tedious, but you're just going to basically put the artist name as artist name, venue name, city as city, so on and so forth. Then outside those brackets, we're going to add the new show dot rating, which is going to equal the rating greater than. I think for this one I also said less than, but the angle should go towards the rating. Sorry about that. 0, ternary operator, rating, else nil. Our new show for those notes is going to equal the notes dot is empty. Again, because these are optional, we need to handle them very carefully. This one will be nil, else it'll equal those notes. And the new show for the dot setlist will equal the setlist. And our context is going to go ahead and insert that new show. So again, when we had the class of show, so we can go back to our models, look at what's in the initializer. These are the things we need to pass through the brackets. The rating, note, setlist, these are both optional, so we need to make sure that we're handling those. And then we have our setlist, and then finally we're using the context.insert to quote unquote save. So this is our entire view model here for the add edit show. We have our kind of field storage. We have our validation rule. It's valid. It has to have a name and a venue. We have the initializer that can branch off on add versus the edit, and then a save that mirrors that logic, that if let and the else. Now to the view that's going to drive it. So in our views, we had that add show edit view. It just has text, add content here. Let's go ahead and remove that text. So if you had to guess, that's right, we're importing SwiftData first. And whenever we add SwiftData, we need to make sure we're adding the environment. Now we're not going to add the query because we're not doing any searching here. We'll then add the /.modelContext, private var, model context. We'll then also add the @environment, and this time we're going to be looking at /.dismiss. Because this is a sheet, we should be able to properly dismiss it. And this will just be called a private var of dismiss. We'll then create a state private var of the view model, which is going to conform to that add edit show view model. Now we're not quite done. We're going to add a let of existing show, which is going to conform to the show marked optional. We're then going to add an initializer. Now, if we were to add the autofill here, it's a little bit all over the place. Instead, we're going to write our own. We're going to have our show, which is going to conform to the capital S show marked optional to equal nil. We'll then add a comma and look at the initial status. Now this is going to be based on the show status, that enum we made all the way back in chapter 1, and by default it'll equal .upcoming. As I mentioned, depending on where we access this sheet from, we're actually going to tell it if it's upcoming or attended. Okay, in our initializer, we're going to have our self.existingShow equal the show, and our self._ViewModel to equal capital S state. Now, not an @ state, just capital S state. We then want to have the initial value. That's going to be our add edit show view model here. We're then going to add our brackets. We're going to pass through the show, which is just the lowercase show, comma, and the initial status of that initial status. And if you accidentally deleted a bracket, make sure both of those exist there. This _view model here within our initializer, with the underscore basically, is accessing the state property wrapper itself, not the wrapped value. You're handing it a pre-constructed view model at the moment the state is initialized. Without this underscore, which is very important, you'll actually get a compilation error. You'd be assigning two view model before the property even exists. With it, SwiftUI takes ownership of that view model instance. tracks its changes, and keeps it alive for the view's lifetime. But we can't declare a second stored @bindable property. The ViewModel is already owned as @state right up here. The solution is a local bindable binding alias right at the top of the body, just like we did in our attended view, right? We had our @bindable, we had it in the variable body sum view, not in the structure of the view. So we'll do that pattern again. @bindable var VM equals ViewModel. So this is that local variable and doesn't care about a second instance. This VM and this ViewModel are the same object. VM just gives us the $ syntax for form binding. Okay, let's finally build that form. We're going to have our navigation stack here, add a brace, and immediately then add the form in our brace. Now with forms, you can add a section in order to separate information and give it a header. So let's add our first section, and we'll pass through the text of show info. Then add a brace, and all the information for the show, all the show info, is going to go within this section. We're going to be using the text field here, and we can add a string for the placeholder text. But the placeholder text of this text field is going to be the artist. We'll then add a comma, text, and we're going to use the bindable, so the $ of VM dot, then the artist name. So we can see here on the preview, we have a text field. Let's see if my preview will let me enter text this time. Nope, still doesn't want to do it. So if you want to fix it, generally speaking, a restart of Xcode fixes this bug. Okay, let's go ahead and add some more text fields here. Let's also have the venue. And we'll have that text based off of the $ VM, and we want the venue name for this one. We'll also have the text field for the city. The text is the vm.city. Now for the date, well, we can either have the user enter it manually, or we can use the built-in date picker for this one. We can give it a placeholder text, just like we've done with the text fields, and then we're going to do the comma, and we'll have the selection, and this is going to be based off the $vm.date. Now we can customize this even further with a comma. We can have the displayed components, because we don't really care about the time, so we're going to have it be displaying the components of just the date. And now you'll see it updates just to the date on the right side, which by default is 1 week in the future, 7 days. Why is it like that? Well, if we go back to our view model down here, when we had our date, we were setting the date by adding how many days? 7 of them to the current time. See, it's all there for a reason. Then we'll be adding a picker next, and this is going to be based off of the status. So that selection is going to be the binding of vm.status. So we can always, manually flip, is this something that's attended or not attended? We'll then add a brace after our picker, because we're going to add a for each here. Within the for each, we're going to be looking at the show status dot all cases, every single one of them, comma, the ID : / .self. We'll then add another brace, and we'll have our status in. And we'll add a text here to display the status.rawValue.capitalized. And then we'll go ahead and, outside that brace, tag them with the status. So if you remember all the way back in our show, we had made it string, codable, and case iterable, literally just for this picker at this very moment. So now, when our preview loads here on the side, we should be able to press on the picker, by default upcoming, but we can swap it to attended. And keep in mind, it does need this dot tag with the status on each row, because we're for eaching, or iterating through each row. Without it, the selection binding actually can't match the value. The picker would appear to work, that selection actually would never stick. Okay, we have a few more things to add. We need to do the rating, we need to do the notes, set list, and a save button. I'm going to briefly skip over the rating because we're going to actually wire up a custom view for that. And instead, we're going to have our section for notes. So we're going to go to the bottom of this section. Lots of open braces here. So after that section, we'll add another one. And we'll call this one notes. We'll add a brace, and we'll add a text field here. Now, with our text fields, you can see they're kind of just limited to one line. So you have a few options. You can either use a text editor, or you can do a little bit of a trick. So I'm going to keep the text field. I'm going to say add notes, ... Then for the text, that'll be the binding of vm.notes. And then we can actually change the axis here. And I'm going to set this to be .vertical. We can then add a property of the line limit, and we can set a range. Now I'm going to set this a range of 3 to 6. And this is actually going to allow us to have this text field grow vertically downward. And our line limit's going to set the range. It starts at 3 lines of height and then expands up to 6 as the user types. Without the line limit, this would actually grow unbounded. So if you had like a huge note, it would kind of just go all the way off the screen. It would look awful. Even though the forms natively are scrollable, we don't want it to look too gross. And we can see here how this notes has like a little bit more oomph. So it has 3 lines by default up to 6. Now I want to keep adding some things before we fully test it. So we're going to add another section after our notes. We'll do section, and this is going to be for the set list. We'll add a brace, and we're going to be handling this with a for each. We'll then look at the ViewModel.SetList.Indices. We'll then have the ID, so we'll do our colon, \self. We'll add our brace, and we'll have our index in. So how do we want our set list to be displayed? Well, I think we'll have on the left side some text that's numbered, 1 through how many songs were in the set list. And then on the right side, we'll have a text field where the user can actually add the song. So let's build that. We'll start off with an HTAG and we'll add our brace. We'll then have our text, and within this text, we're actually going to have our \, and we're going to do our string interpolation. We're going to be looking at the index plus 1. In Swift, whenever we have an array, it actually starts at 0. So if you didn't have this plus 1, it would actually start at 0. That list starting at 0 doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So that plus 1 is going to start it at 1, and every other song we add will be 2, 3, 4, sequentially. Okay, for our text, let's add a foreground style, and we'll set it to be secondary. And we can also add a frame here, because we want it to be pretty small. We'll custom set the width to be 28. We can also add some alignment, and we can have this be leading. So it's kind of pushed more to the left. We'll also include the text of the ViewModel.SetList, and we'll be looking at that index. Okay, at the bottom of this for each here that we're looping through, we'll add our .onDelete, add our brace. We'll use the ViewModel.SetList.remove, and we're going to be looking at the offsets of $0. And what if we want to reorder our set list? Well, we can do the .onMove, then add our brace, and we'll look at the ViewModel once again, .SetList, and we'll use the .move. We'll then add our bracket from offsets. So where do we want to move it from? Well, we'll take it from $0 to offsets where it currently is, to the offset of $1 where we want to move it. So this will allow us to move and reorder. Cool, now we just need to give the user the option to actually add the song. So we'll create another text field here. Placeholder add song. The text is going to be based off of the binding of vm.newSetlistEntry. We can then have a button here which will say add. I'll scroll down a little bit here, add our brace, and we'll look at the ViewModel.addSetlistEntry. And we've put in the work in the ViewModel, so now we can use it in the view. This is also going to be disabled based on a condition. So it'll be disabled when the ViewModel.newSetlistEntry.trimming characters, again, in those white spaces is empty. So whenever the text here in the add song, you can see if there's no text here, the add button's actually grayed out and we can't press it. We don't want to add blank songs. That would be a bad user experience. Okay, let's move down 3 braces. So essentially we're going to go all the way down to the end of our navigation stack because our form is done for now. And we're going to add our navigation title. And this navigation title is going to be based off of the existing show. If that equals nil, we'll have a ternary operator. So whenever there's no title currently, it'll say add show. If a show had already existed, it'll instead, with our else here, say edit show. You can also customize where it is with the .navigation bar display title mode, and I'm going to set this to be inline. I'm then also going to add a .toolbar ladder brace. So we want to give the user an option to cancel, to completely dismiss. So we'll create our toolbar item. And for this, we're going to give the placement, because otherwise it add it in the top right. So for our placement, we're going to use the .cancellation action. The users can find it in a familiar place. We'll add a brace, create a button here, labeled cancel. We'll then add a brace, and we're just going to call upon that dismiss we had created earlier with the empty brackets. So this is going to dismiss the sheet, essentially canceling the work. We can then add another toolbar item. For this placement here, we're going to set this to instead be the .confirmation action. We'll add a brace, and we'll add a button to finally save. I know some of you are like, finally, we can add to our list. So within the braces of this button, we're going to look at our view model here. .save, and we can do the to, and we're going to do the autofill with the existing. So where are we saving it to? That lowercase m model context. For the existing, well, that would go to that existing show. We're already grabbing that. Then we're actually going to call upon that dismiss with the empty brackets. Once we save, we also want to dismiss the show. We want this button to be disabled based off of condition. So whenever it's not a valid form, they shouldn't be able to save. We can use our exclamation point of our view model. .is valid. Again, exclamation point looks for the opposite. So it's disabled whenever it's not valid. How is it valid? In our view model, it has to have an artist name and a venue name. It has to have some text in it. Okay, you'll notice though with our toolbar, once our preview refreshes here, we can't see the navigation title and we can't see the toolbar item currently in the preview for our form. But we can now go ahead and test saving and adding to those lists. So I know we created a bunch here. We have our save data, we have the ability to dismiss, we have our view model, we have our initializer, we have a form with the info where they can input the information through text fields, pickers, date picker. We have the section for notes where we have our custom note text field. We have our set list where they can delete and move the order of the set list, and it'll display it in sequential listed order. We have the button to add, but only when the song has text. We also have the toolbar with the cancel to dismiss and the save button that only lets them save when there's the proper required information of the artist and the venue. Holy smokes, that was a ton. Now, before we hit the run button, we're really going to quickly go to our attended view over here, and we're going to scroll down to where we have our toolbar and our button here. To our .sheet is presented. Now you'll notice with our add, edit, show, view, we have empty brackets. We can set the initial status though. Apparently I called it StarRatingView, so I might have to go back and fix that. So my brain is not like, what is this? And for this initial status, because we're doing this from the attended view, we'll set that to be attended. And you know what, before I forget, let me go ahead and fix that. So we'll go back here. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that right up here. You can also use the refactor trick. You can rename it across your code base. But I'm just going to quickly go ahead and fix that. Okay, so now when we press it on the attended view sheet, it'll set that status to already be attended. And if we go to our upcoming view, we can do the exact same thing, but set it to be the initial status of instead dot upcoming. All right, moment of truth. Let's go ahead and run our app and see how this looks and feels. Build succeeded. Beautiful. All right, currently we have no results in attended or upcoming. So let's create an attended show. We can see here the status was immediately set to attended and the date is the current date and time. Let's go ahead and fill out this information. So I'm going to add a artist. I like how it actually gave me the autocorrect for Beyonce with the proper E. Love that. Venue, let's go ahead and say, oh, you know what I noticed? Our toolbar information isn't showing. Let's go back in our edit view. I must have put it in the wrong spot. Okay, so something to note, whenever you have a navigation stack, things like your toolbar, your navigation title, they need to go at the bottom of your navigation stack, but not outside of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code here. So Command X, and we're going to move it up one brace. My apologies there. And let's go ahead and rerun the app. Wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead and press plus. There we go. We have our cancel, and our save's currently disabled no matter how hard we press it, because we can't actually save without the artist and the venue. So let's go ahead and fill in that information again. And you can see once we have some text in the artist and venue, the save is available. I'm going to continue to fill this out. We can also press on the date picker here, and because it's something that we've attended, we could put it backwards in time. So let's say hypothetically it was June 1st. And our status was automatically set to attended because we opened it from the attended view. We can also choose to add notes. Now I'm going to add more lines, but we can see when we get to 6, it kind of starts to scroll if we have a ton of notes. However, it doesn't completely take over the screen. So the user can continue to type. They just have to scroll within the text field here. Amazing. Okay, let's add some songs. I'm going to try to see if I can remember some Beyonce songs. So we can see when we have text, we can press add, and look, we have the number 1, Crazy in Love. Now if we wanted to delete it, we could swipe to delete. But let's go ahead and add a few more. We'll add this one here, and now let's try to rearrange them. So we can press and hold and rearrange. Now Beautiful Liars 1 and Crazy in Love is 2, and we can also delete these as well. And if it's empty, we can't press add. So let's go ahead and save our show. Beautiful. Beyonce played at the Staples Center, LA, June 1st. Now, if we were to add, and let's say we add some more information, like let's do Jay-Z this time. I don't know why I'm so hung up on them. Let's say we're adding more information, but we're like, oh, wait, I actually want to cancel. If we press cancel, it doesn't get populated in our list, and when we press plus, we have a fresh new form. Now let's look at upcoming. Currently, there's no upcoming shows. Attended is different. Let's press the plus button here. And we can see here we have the exact same form, but this time upcoming. So I'll just quickly fill out some of this information. So Tupac's upcoming, I guess it's a Tupac hologram. And again, the status is automatically set to upcoming. We don't have to add notes or add a set list, and we can save. And now we have our upcoming and our attended, which are separate. Now what if I wanted to edit this information? If I were to press on it right now, we're taken to a blank detail view. So we still have some things to add for our app. We're going to add SwipeActions to be able to edit, as well as some detail views so we can actually view more about the concert. And we still need to have those star ratings, of course. So that takes us to our next chapter, the SwipeActions. Oh, but before we do that, let's verify that it saves. Perfect. We can see our attended and our upcoming saves. Even if we were to delete them, let's go ahead and remove this upcoming one. The deleted ones will also save as being deleted. They're no longer there. Welcome to chapter 6. So let's say we're looking at our upcoming shows, and let's say I have this Blink 182 one, and I want to mark this one as attended. Where does that action live? Well, the obvious answer would be to tap into this view. You'd have the detail view, which you build in the next chapter, and you would, kind of find the option and flip it. And that works. But that's 3 whole taps to do something simple. And if you're routing users through a whole screen just to flip a status, well, that's not great UX. There's actually a better pattern, and the action will live on this row itself. You may have already been familiar with it with the delete action. So what we're going to be doing is exploring swipe actions. We're going to have a leading swipe action that opens a sheet, applies a rating, and mutates the show status. When that status changes, SwiftData moves the row to the attended tab automatically. No routing code, no manual list updates. So let's build that. So we're going to be working in our upcoming view. Within the upcoming view, we're going to navigate within our else of the group where we have our list, and we actually want to go after this navigation link. So still within the for each braces here, and we're going to be using the swipe actions. We want it to be right on each row because right now for our onDelete, we're using trailing. That's where delete lives in most apps like mail, messages, pretty much everywhere. Users are trained to take the object and swipe it trailing in order to delete it. So in order to augment it, we're going to use leading. So we can do our swipe actions with the .swipe actions. Now I'm not going to use the autofill. Instead, I'm just going to add my bracket, and we're going to include the edge with the colon. From here, we can use dot notation, but like I mentioned before, we're going to do leading to kind of swipe from the left edge. That's the edge that users are used to. We'll then add our brace. What do we want to have happen? Well, let's add a button here that just says attend. We'll then add our brace. I'm going to go ahead and apply some tint as well. Just as a note for buttons, use tint to change the background color. I'm going to make this one green. We have red for destructive with the delete, so let's mark this one as green. I'm going to go ahead and quickly run it in the simulator as my preview keyboard's being a little bit janky still. But if you want to do it in the preview, you can also test it there. So let's go to our upcoming and we'll grab and swipe it to the left. We can see we now have the attend button that's popped up. Perfect. Right now, pressing it actually doesn't do anything. We need to wire that up. And we're going to be wiring that up first in the view model. So because we're in the upcoming view, we're going to navigate to the upcoming view model. Makes sense. We need to add a couple more variables. The variables we're going to add are the show to mark attended. And this is going to be a show, and we'll mark it as optional. Then we'll have a variable of a pending rating as well, because after the users attended a show, we should prompt them to rate the show on their experience, and they can give it the stars. So we have these 2 pieces of state, and we've marked this one as optional because it's going to be driving the sheet. Nil means closed. A show means open with that show, and then our pending rating holds the stars. We'll also give them like a little sheet that they can tap before they commit. It lives on the view model, so the sheet can bind to it, and marks as attended can read it back. That's it for the state. The sheet presentation is going to be handled by the sheet item, which we'll be wiring next. So let's go back into our upcoming view, and in our button of attended, we're going to look at our view model, .show mark attended, and we're going to have that equal the current show. Again, it's grabbing that information from the list. Now, before we add the sheet modifier, we can actually scroll down and we have our sheet is presented down here. This is where we're presenting the edit of the show. So we've done this is presented and it looks really simple, right? Because this Boolean version here essentially needs 2 things, a bool to present and then a separate variable to hold the data you need inside the sheet. You have to manage both, keep them in sync, and make sure the data variable is set before the bool flips to true. But there's a separate version. If we do .sheet and we look at the item and then the content, this takes an optional binding. When the optional is non-nil, the sheet appears. The item is passed directly into the sheet closure. No separate state, no coordination. So 1 optional, 2 jobs. So for our item binding, we'll do our $VM dot show to mark attended. For our content, we're going to delete the placeholder here, and instead outside the brackets, we'll add our brace. We'll look at our show in, then we're going to look at the mark attended sheet. Now this doesn't exist yet, but when we do create it, we're going to be passing through a show, which is going to be that show, and we'll also have the view model be our view model. We'll get an error because it doesn't exist, but essentially the way this works is when this show to mark attended is set, the sheet appears with that show. When it's nil after dismiss, the sheet goes away. SwiftUI manages that automatically. So now we need this view to exist. The button works, but we need somewhere to ask for the rating as well. So in our views, I'm going to right click on the views folder. We're going to go ahead and right click new file from template. We're going to do our SwiftUI view. Let's call it the MarkAttendedSheet. We'll get rid of our placeholder text of hello world. And under the struct of view, we're going to establish our show, which will conform to the capital show class. Then we'll have our @bindable for the variable of ViewModel, which is that upcoming ViewModel. Again, we're using this for our upcoming show view because we're going to be able to mark it as attended and have that rating. Then we'll use the @environment, and we're going to use the \.dismiss, and we'll call it private var dismiss. So the show is a let. We're not mutating it here. We're just reading the name. The ViewModel is marked as bindable because we'll bind directly to the ViewModel pending rating, and dismiss gives us that classic kind of dismiss this sheet close action. All right, now within the body, we need to give it some visuals. So you'll notice our preview has an error. You can either fill in with like a sample show and your VM. I'm just going to go ahead and opt to actually delete the preview as we're going to blast through creating this view, and we can see it when we open up the sheet. So I'm opting to be slightly lazy for this one. Okay, let's create our navigation stack. I'm going to go ahead and add a brace and then immediately add the VStack. I'm going to include some spacing on this VStack, and I'm going to make it something high like 24, so there's a lot of room. Then I'm going to add my brace, and we'll add a text view. We're going to kind of prompt the user and ask them, how was, and then we'll use the string interpolation for the show.artistName. We'll also add a little question mark there. From here, we can style it with some font. I'm going to do a large font like title 2. We can also bold it if we want to make sure that we're accepting very long strings for artists with long names. We can use the .multi-line text alignment. And I'm also going to set this to be center, and I'll have the line limit be set to 2. It's an integer, so it's a whole number. And we can also add some padding off the top. My autofill put 16, but I'll just put padding for top. Then I'm going to just make a placeholder with comments that our StarRatingView will go here. If you remember when we're creating the form, we still haven't created that. So we're going to come back to these once we've created the StarRatingView and then add them. And we'll say that this is actually optional, and that you can always add rating later. And because it's kind of smaller, we'll set this font to be caption and maybe the foreground style of secondary, so it's not taking up any visual kind of hierarchy there. We'll then put a spacer so everything's pushed. After the VStack, I'm going to add some padding, and then we can also include a navigation title because we are navigating to this sheet. So I'm going to say mark as attended. And we're also going to have the navigation title display mode set to .inline as well. So we've created essentially our title here, which asks how is the artist name's show. We'll then implement that star rating, and we'll tell the users that you can always add the rating later if you want to think about it. And we have our navigation title as well. And this show artist name is being pulled from the bindable ViewModel. Okay, so we still have some work to do. Because we're presenting a sheet, yes, the user could swipe down, but we want to make it a proper app with a lot of user experience. So we're going to add a .toolbar right after our navigation title. So we're going to have 2 buttons with 2 very different paths. First toolbar item we'll put our placement here. And because it's going to be our cancel action, we can use the .cancel action placement at a brace. And we'll put a button here that says cancel. And as we've done before, essentially we'll just dismiss. But before we do that, we're going to make sure that we actually clear the pending rating on the ViewModel. So we'll look at that .pending rating, and we'll set that to be 0. Then we'll call upon the dismiss with the empty parameters. So after this toolbar items, we're going to go down 2 braces here. We're going to create our other one. You can probably guess what this one's going to be for. So our placement is going to be the .confirmation action. because we're going to have a button that says done. Or you can say save, it's up to you. I think done is slightly more clear. We're then going to reference our ViewModel, but we're going to reference something that doesn't exist yet, which is the MarkAttended. We're going to pass through the show. So we are going to get an error. I promise we'll fix it. Once we've marked it, we're going to go ahead and dismiss it. So our cancel here sets our pending rating to be 0 before dismissing. That's kind of a defensive move. The next show the user swipes shouldn't inherit any leftover rating. Then dismisses the sheet. We've seen that before. When we have done, we're going to call upon the marks as attended, then dismisses. Now this doesn't exist yet, and that's where the mutation is going to happen. As a bonus, if you want to make this even better, you can go to the end of your navigation stack, so outside of it this time, so 4 braces after our dismiss here, and add the dot presentation detents. So this is the kind of size of the sheet, right? So normally with our other sheet, it was taking up like 90% of the screen, only the top wasn't completely full. Well, with the presentation detents, we can actually set it to be a certain size. So you'll add your square brackets, we can press dot, and we have large, medium, we also have custom and heights. I'm going to set it to be medium. I only want this sheet to take up about half the screen maybe. It doesn't need to be a full screen popover. So before we go ahead and test it, let's make this mark as attended actually do something. So we're going to navigate to our upcoming ViewModel after our function of delete. Make a little bit of space here, and we're going to make a new method called function mark as attended. And as we saw before, we're going to be passing through an underscore of show, which conforms to the class of show. We'll add a brace. Now we'll be looking at the show.status, and we're flipping it to be attended. We'll look at the show.rating, and this is going to equal the pending rating. And we'll use our greater than 0 ternary operator pending rating to be set to nil. Then we'll flip that pending rating to equal 0 again. Essentially, we're clearing it that same kind of defensive move. And then we'll have the show to mark attended, and that's going to now equal nil. So these 4 lines, essentially the show status to attended is the one that matters the most. That's what the query in attended view is filtering on. The moment this line runs, the attended view's query results change. We then have the rating here. This is something that's conditional. If the user doesn't touch the stars, the rating stays nil. Super clean. Then we're resetting it, kind of the defensive move. So if I have a pending rating of 4 and then I cancel the sheet or I update it, next time I open up the sheet, I don't want that rating to by default be 4. That wouldn't make sense. We'll set it to be 0, so it's way cleaner. And we're also setting the show to mark attended to also be nil, cleaning the state for the next interaction. Okay, let's go ahead and see it in action. I'm going to run it, and we can see our marked attended sheet. Again, we still need those stars, but we'll be adding those very soon. All right, my simulator's loaded. I'm going to navigate to upcoming. We can swipe over, and you can either like fully swipe over and it'll trigger the sheet. I'm just going to hit cancel real quick, or you can kind of slightly swipe and press the attend button. All right, because we've set it to be medium, it's only taking about half up the page. How was Blink 182? We don't have our stars right now, so it'll look way better, I promise. But we can press done, and look what happens. It's no longer on our upcoming sheet, and because query saw that the value changed in attended, we now have Blink 182 in that as well. Wonderful. So it's there, there's no routing code, no list manipulation, one status mutation, and the queries react. And that is SwiftData. Again, if we go to the attended view, scroll back up, this query with SwiftData is filtering for the status of equals exactly dot attended. When it changes, the query reevaluated and the row moved because the data itself moved. The one edge case worth calling out, which is the cancel path. So if we go back to our mark as attended sheet here we are. We have a line with cancel, the ViewModel pending rating equals 0. That's the only thing between a correct experience and a confusing one. The reset happens in 2 places. The cancel button, which is defensive here, and the mark as defended, and in our ViewModel whenever we save. So the detail views and the star rating views are in the next chapter. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on into chapter 7. Okay, it's finally time to allow users to edit and see the full details of their show and add that custom star rating view. We're going to be starting off in our attended view because when we have our list here, we go through all the shows and we have a navigation link for each one of those shows. So we're saying that yes, you can press on this in order to navigate. Then when we scroll down, we have our navigation title and our navigation destination. And currently right now, it's commented off with the show detail view, exact same thing for the upcoming view. So we already have the navigation wired, we just need to give it a screen to navigate to. So let's create a new SwiftUI view. We're going to right click on our views folder, because it's a view, so we're going to keep it organized, of course. Then we're going to create a new file from template. It's going to be a SwiftUI view. We're going to call this one Show Detail View. Remove our text of hello world, and under our struct, we're going to add some information. We're going to start off with our @bindable of the variable of show, which is going to conform to that class of show. So this one line is really, really important. The navigation link is going to pass in show. So if we really quickly hop back over into our attended view, scroll back up, the navigation link, look at that, the value of show. We need to make sure that we're able to receive it and make sure that's bindable. The SwiftData will keep it persistent. And because we're using SwiftData, let's go back into our show detail view @environment. And we'll have our \dot model container @environment with the \dot model context, private var, model context 2. And then our environment, we're going to be able to dismiss this sheet. So let's also set that up with the .dismiss, private var dismiss. And within the structure, we're going to add a few more state properties just to flag. We're going to have one that's saying, hey, you're showing the editing sheet, you're showing the delete alert, or you have a new setlist entry. So let's create all of those. We'll give them appropriate names like showing edit sheet. And this one's going to equal false. We're going to have these two be booleans of another state private var. And we'll call it showing delete alert will equal false. And then the third state private var is going to be the new setlist entry. And that's going to equal an empty string by default. For our preview, we can actually really easily fix this one if you want. We're going to press apply. And for the show, we can go ahead and create a custom sample show here with our 5 required variables. Okay, there's our filled-in preview. Now for the view content. The first section is going to be the show's kind of like metadata. The artist, venue, kind of those 5 required parameters. These ones are read-only. We're not binding to them. So the standard pattern key for a value row in a list since iOS 17 is the labeled content. It takes a label string and a value string and handles the alignment, font weight, and color automatically. The label is the primary text weight and the value is secondary. We don't have to build that manually. So we're going to create a list here. We'll add a brace and immediately I'm going to add a section and we'll just call it something like show info. We'll add a brace after that section and we'll use that labeled content. So the first thing we need to pass through is the text, as I mentioned before. So we'll display the artist. Then we pass through a value. Well, that value has already been handled for us. We'll do the show.artistName. And we're going to continue this pattern for the next 5. So even if you want to, you can copy and paste this and then just update the values. So I'll do venue next, followed by city. We'll then do the date. Now, just a note for the date, as we've seen before, when we've had the date be displayed, it's been a little bit janky. So what I recommend doing is doing the show.date, then do the .formatted. And from here, I'm gonna have the date be actually .long. And I'm going to have the time be dot omitted as well, because we don't really need to see it. Fantastic. And I believe all we're missing now is the status. And that value, we do have to make sure, because we're using the enum, is we're looking at that raw value for the string. So this one, the value will be show.status.raw value, and we'll also have it be capitalized. So we have these 5 lines of code. The date formatter uses long for the date and omitted for the time. We don't store that time, so we don't display one. And this capitalized is really handy on the status, the raw, because without it, it's attended with a lowercase a. With the capitalized, starts with a capitalized A. One small modifier makes it look way more professional. Okay, so this is what our show info is going to look like before we have our star rating. I know, I've been waiting to build it for so long too. Before we run it in the simulator, we're going to go to our upcoming view and our attended view. And we need to go to the navigation destination where we're currently holding these comments. And instead, we're going to actually have the show detail view, and we're passing through the show of show. So it'll be lowercase show on both ends. We'll go to the attended view as well, and we'll also make that fix. Now let's run it in the simulator. Okay, and we can see the shows that we've added. Like I said, you may have added more. Let's go ahead and press on the Beyonce one. There we go. None of the information is editable. We can just see what had happened. We can go back. And upcoming, I don't have a show right now, so I'm just going to quickly create one. And we'll go ahead and save. Same thing, we should be able to click on this and we see the information. Perfect. Now we're not done yet. We still don't have our star rating view. I know, I've been waiting to build it forever too. So let's go ahead and go back into Xcode. We're going to right click and we're going to create a new file from template, which will be that SwiftUI view called StarRatingView. I'm excited to be here. I don't know about you. Okay, let's go ahead and remove our text. Under our structure, we're going to add our @binding variable of rating. Now, this is actually going to be an integer value. We don't want double because we want to have those full ratings. 1 point of rating is 1 star. We're not doing any half. We'll then add a private let of the max rating that the user can give, which will be 5. Now, in order to fix our preview down here, we could create a custom struct, or we can actually just add a constant to handle the number. So we can have our rating, and we can set it to be the dot constant. I'll just set it to 4. If we really want to, we can actually have multiple previews with multiple ratings. But essentially what we're building here with our star rating view is we're going to have our binding of rating int, and then we're going to have 5 buttons, and each one checking whether the star index is at or below the current rating to decide whether it's filled or unfilled, similar to how we were displaying that rating with the for each. So let's go ahead and build it. Within our view, we're going to start off with an H stack. We'll then add our brace, and we'll use our for each. And for the data, we'll have our range of 1 all the way to the max rating, which is 5. We'll then have the ID, which will be our \self. We'll add our brace outside of the brackets, and we'll have our star in. So we're going to be looping through all of those stars. So for all the stars, they'll be represented with a button. We'll then add a brace because we're going to use a custom label with an SF symbol. Within the action of the button, we'll use the with animation, so it's a little bit more polished. And you can choose whichever animation you like. I'm going to go with a spring animation, and I want mine to also have a response time. I'll set that to be something small, like 0.5. Then add the brace, and I'm going to include the rating to use the equals rating. We'll double equals for the star. We'll use our ternary operator of 0, else it'll be star. This is kind of our check logic. Now, when you're using the button with a custom label, we need to include that. So we're going to go to the end of the button here. So down 2 braces from where we just were, and we'll use the label with the colon and add an additional brace. Now this is where we're going to be using the image with the system name, and this is going to be actually based off the rating. So we'll have it be the star, and we'll look for the less than or equal to the rating, and we'll use our ternary operator. So we want to display how it looks when it's filled, so we'll use the star.fill, else it'll just be that empty star. So the star.fill shows a filled star, and we can actually see it in our preview right now with our value of 4. It's going to show the filled star with the color, and then for the remaining stars, they're going to be empty. Let's go ahead and style our stars a little bit more. This is the whole point of the view anyway, so we'll give it some love. So with SF symbols, you can change their size with the dot font, and we'll use the foreground style here in order to say, okay, when a star has been selected based on that rating, we'll set it to be probably yellow. Otherwise, we'll give it a different color, probably the secondary, so it looks a little bit more grayed out. So we'll use the exact same logic here. So star less than equal to rating, we'll use our ternary operator. So we want that color to be yellow. Else we'll use the color dot secondary. Now when this updates, we can see we have that kind of gray star. It's not being filled in gray, the outline instead is gray. It's not a star.fill, just a normal star. We can also have the scale effect here as well as another modifier. We'll again look at the star less than or greater to the rating. We'll use our ternary operator. We'll put 1.1, else 1.0. And after the scale effect, we'll add a little bit of an animation here as well. I'll do the dot spring, and we'll have the response time. Set this to also be 0.5. And the value for that animation is going to be based off when the rating changes. We can also include a button style here, and I'm going to set that to be dot plain. Because these are buttons, they just look like those stars. So because we have it set to a constant right now in this preview, it's actually not updating because the number is statically 4. When we run this in our app and other screens, because it won't be living in this siloed preview, we'll see it update with those animations. The most important logic here is within the toggle behavior, where we have this rating equals rating, double checking for the star. If we tap the star we've already selected, it becomes 0. Back in the show detail view, the binding converts 0 to nil. So tapping a fill star actually clears the rating. And this plain button style prevents the tappable area from expanding to fill the whole list row. Without it, any tap would actually trigger the first star's button. So very important that we include those modifiers. Okay, our rating is done. Now let's go ahead and wire it into our views before we forget. So we'll start off in alphabetical order. We're going to go to our add, edit, show view. In this file, we had some sections here with our notes and our set list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put our rating above the notes. But remember, this is something that's also optional, and we only have stars when it's been attended. So we can actually use an if statement here, and we'll look at the view model. And if that status double equals, so we're checking for the value, dot attended, we'll add a brace. Then we'll show the section. Because if it's upcoming, how can we rate it without experiencing it? We'll give the section title a rating, add a brace, and we'll reference that star rating view, and we will pass through the rating. It wants a binding integer, so we'll do our $VM.rating. I'm also going to add a little bit of padding here as well, make it vertical. We'll give it the padding of 4. Now in our preview, we can't see it right now because by default it's upcoming, but if we were to swap this to attended, now we can see the rating and we can click on the buttons with those animations. So if this is a 5-star show, we have all 5 stars and we can play around with this. As I mentioned as well, if we double press on the star, let's say it's 3 stars, but actually I don't want to give it a rating. So we can press on the stars again and we can clear the rating. That's very, very important for user experience. Okay, the next place we're adding it is in the show detail view. So after our labeled content here, we can go to the end of this section. We're going to go down 1 brace and we're going to look again, if the show.status equals attended, so dot attended, then we can have this section for rating. So we'll do the exact same thing. we'll add a brace, and we'll look at our star rating view. So because the show's rating property is actually an int marked optional, it's optional because an attended show might not have been rated yet, the star rating view takes a non-optional binding int. So we're going to bridge them together with a manual binding. So in our code placeholder, we're going to do the capital B binding, and we're going to use the get and the set. The get is going to return the rating or 0 if nil. So for our value, we're going to instead add some braces, and we'll look at the show.rating. We'll use our nil collecting operator and then 0. Make sure you add a space after the 0 too. For our set, this will convert 0 back to nil. So we'll add our brace just like we did before, and we'll have the show.rating, and we're going to look at that first value, so $0, and we'll say, okay, if that's greater than 0, we'll use our ternary operator. We'll look at that $0 again, else nil. And we can see we have our rating here. Once again, when we tap on, we can then clear the entire rating if we select the same button twice. And if you remember, we also in our MarkAttendedSheet, we're planning on using the star. We even have it commented off here. So let's go ahead and have that star rating view. And for that rating, we'll use the binding of ViewModel.pendingRating. So let's go ahead and quickly see our MarkAttendedSheet so we can also see that star rating in action there as well. So we have one upcoming show. We'll do our attend. Now we can see how was sample. And just for full user flow, let's mark it with 3 stars. We'll press done. Now when we go to the attended, we can see, because it does have a rating, we can see it in the list view, as well as when we press on it, we have the option to change the rating, which does save thanks to our good friend SwiftData. So things we had wired up and created before are coming in full swing now. We've wired up these stars here, but we don't have an option to edit the notes that are available in the detail view. Let's go ahead and go back to our show detail view, and we'll add a new section for notes. I know we got pretty sidetracked by the rating, but it's a pretty big add. We're going to go after our show status of attended, and we're going to create a new section for notes. We'll add our brace, and we're going to be doing an if let here for the notes. And this is going to equal the show notes. We'll then use a comma, and we'll check to make sure that the notes aren't empty. And if that's the case, if there is text value here, we'll go ahead and just display those notes. We can then use an else statement to have some text to say no notes added. We can also add some foreground style here and just make it secondary. This way it's reactive. So in our preview right now, we don't have any notes, so we'll probably see that kind of more empty state. We can see no notes added. We still have some more data to display in this view, which is our inline set list with for each. Now, if we remember from our model, our set list is something that's an array of string. We need to actually display each song with a row number, allow deleting rows, allow reordering rows, and let the user add new songs. All in line, no separate form. Let's go back to our show detail view, and we'll add another section for the set list. We'll add a brace. We're first going to check to see if it's empty or not. So if the show.setlist.is empty, we're going to just display to them some text, and we'll say no songs added. We'll also set this foreground style to be secondary, so that more grayed out, just like the notes has currently. We can then use our else to be like, okay, otherwise they have some songs added. Let's go ahead and loop through those with a for each. We'll be then looking at the show.setlist.indices. We'll do a comma and then the ID, which will be that \self. We'll add a brace and we'll have our index in. This is where we're looping through all of those different set lists. And you'll probably remember the logic from the previous chapter when we had created the form. We're going to do the exact same thing with our H stack. We'll have some text. As a reminder, when we have the index, it starts at 0 in array. So we're going to actually string interpolate that value of index plus 1. I'm going to add that foreground style. And if you want to, you could actually probably go back and copy and paste our logic. But again, I'm just going to go ahead and type it out again. We'd have a frame with a width. We'll set that to be 28. And we'll have some alignment, which will be leading. And then finally, we'll show some more text, which is the show.setlist. And we'll have that index. Now, if you remember from our forum, we were able to move and delete. So let's create similar logic. We'll start with our onDelete. We'll do our brace, and we'll look at the index set in. From here, we're going to be looking at the show.setlist. And we're going to use the .remove at, but instead of the at normal, we're going to do the .remove at offsets. Well, what offset would that be? It would just be that index set. So that's our onDelete. We'll go down after that brace and we'll do our .onMove. We'll add our brace and we'll have a source and a destination in. Once again, we'll be looking at the show.setlist. And we're going to be using the .move this time. We have the autofill with the from and to offsets. So we're going to be looking at taking it from the source, where it currently is, to the destination. So it's going to go from point A to point B. Amazing. So currently this is our display of the set list. Right now in the preview, we have no songs added. Don't worry, we'll see it live soon. But we're going to actually go to the bottom of our else here. So down 2 braces. And this is where we need to add the H stack to be able to add songs to the set list. So make a new H stack, add our brace, and we're going to have a text field. We'll give it the text like add song. And the text is going to be the binding, so these are $, of new set list entry. We'll then have a button, we'll just call it something like add. We'll add our brace, and we're going to look at the trimmed. So we'll have a let trimmed to equal the new set list entry, dot trimming characters in, and we're going to be looking at the dot white spaces. We'll then have a guard statement, and we'll look at the opposite of trimmed is empty. Else we'll go ahead and return. We'll also have this button, just like we did before. Even if we have nothing, we can press add. We'll be disabling this button when there's no content as well. Before we do that, we're going to look at our show.setlist, and we're going to use the .append of that trimmed. So we're going to add it to that array. And then we're going to clear the new setlist entry text by having it just equal an empty string. So if I typed in Blink 182 and I pressed add, it's an empty text field in the next one. Let's go after this button here and we'll add the .disabled based on if the new setlist entry .trimming characters in the .white spaces. From there, we'll look at the is empty. So whenever this text field's empty, we can't add. We can see this in the preview. When we add text, that button lights back up. Wonderful. We are going to go down 3 braces here because we now need to add our toolbar. And this toolbar is going to allow us to either edit the show or delete the show. Now, currently we can delete the show from the list, but we should also, for user experience, allow users to delete the show in the detail view as well. So we're going to be starting off with our .toolbar. Again, you'll see a lot of common patterns from a lot of the views that we've made here. We're going to have our toolbar item. So we're going to start with our edit show. So for this placement, we're going to be setting this one to be the .primary action. We'll add a brace. We'll then use a menu, add another brace. And in this menu, I want to have my first button say edit show. From here, we'll add a brace and we'll have our showing edit sheet, which we added a long time ago, Boolean value to be true. After the button, I'm going to add a divider for my menu, and I'll add another button after that. This is going to be our delete show. This is going to be marked with the role of being destructive. So the users know this is something that is destructive. We're deleting something. And we're going to be actually displaying an alert. So we'll be using the showing delete alert. We're going to flip that one to be true. We want to warn the users, hey, you're deleting this show. And we marked it as destructive. You'll notice with our onDelete, with our swipe action, it's already destructive by default. Okay, we're going to move down to the closing brace of our menu, so down 2. We're going to add that custom label for it. And for this one, I'm just going to do an image with the system name of the ellipses circle. I don't remember how to spell that, so I'm going to go to my object library. I believe it's ELLIPSIS. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. That's the one I wanted. Ellipses circle. It's a very weird word to spell, at least in my opinion. All right, next we have to wire up the sheet. So we're going to go down 3 braces, essentially after the closing brace of the toolbar, and we're going to add the dot sheet, and we're going to have our is presented for this one. We're going to use our binding of showing edit sheet, add a brace, and the sheet we're going to be presenting is one we had created a while ago, which is that add edit show view. And we need to pass through the parameter of show, which is just whatever show we're currently working with. After the sheet, we'll be exploring the dot alert. This is going to basically warn the user, hey, are you sure you want to delete the show? So we'll add our string first, that message, delete show question mark. We'll then add a comma, and this is going to be is presented based off of a Boolean value. Similar to the sheet, we need to have something, flip and be like, oh, is this true? And then we'll show that alert or the sheet, right? So the binding we're going to be using is the $ showing delete alert. We'll then add our brace. Within the alert, we can actually add custom buttons. The first one will be delete. Once again, I recommend setting this one's role to be destructive because it's something that is going to delete something. We need to warn the users about that. And for the action, we're going to look at the model context.delete, and we're going to pass through that show. But we also want to dismiss that notification, that kind of alert that pops up. We'll add another button, which is actually going to be to cancel. We'll also include a role for this one, but instead of destruction, we'll do the cancel. And we actually don't need to provide an action. Instead, we'll use the empty braces. Our cancel action essentially just dismisses the sheet. Now you can also choose to add a message as well. So after that brace, we'll add a custom message with the brace. And for the code, we can just display a text view and we can give a message like, hey, this will permanently remove. And then we're going to string interpolate that show. We'll say from your history. We're warning the users. Okay, we have added a ton, and I mean a ton of code within here. I just want to reiterate a few things. So we had looked at the primary action, which puts it in the top right on iOS. Because we have a divider in our menu, this is like that kind of line between edit, delete. It's really optional, but it helps give that small separation, which is a small UX cue that these are different categories of action. Then when we have our button of delete show, role destructive, it's what makes it that kind of red and positions it appropriately on the menu. We don't handle the deletion here. Instead, we're just showing that alert. Then within the alert, that's where we're handling and wiring up that deletion. We then also have our sheet, which we've seen this pattern before, to when we press edit, we bring up that sheet we've made before. We don't need to necessarily have this turn into another edit page if we've already created that. So we'll use that small little pop-up edit, make those changes, and see them reflect instantly because of SwiftData. All right, let's go ahead and run it on our simulator and see it in action. Okay, well, let's go ahead and choose one of these attended concerts. You could also do this in upcoming. All right, we see all the information, and now in the top right with that primary action, I'll just go ahead and scroll down so we can see the code down here as well. This is where we have that menu. So that menu is kind of this pop-up. It's hard to see. I always find dividers hard to see, but we do have that gray bar visual distinction. Let's first edit the show. So this pops up our edit sheet. Again, we don't need to recreate this. So let's change some information. Instead of the venue being my house, we can change all of this information, even the date. If we really wanted to, we can change if it was attended or upcoming. We have full control. We have the stars. We can add notes. Even our set list here. So let's just add a few songs. Perfect. So we've made some changes. Now, because of SwiftData, when we save this, we can see that it immediately reflects upon the detail view. We now can see our notes. We have our set list, and if we really wanted to, even without pressing edit, we can rearrange these as well, or even delete them. We also saw down here, when we press the delete button, it doesn't immediately delete the show. Instead, we get the delete show, which is our header here, and then we have that message. This will permanently remove the artist name from your history. So we can choose to either cancel, which cancels the action, or we can choose to delete it. Now, because we're doing a demo, we can see that it does delete bye-bye Blink-182. So that's our detail view, and it works the exact same whether the show is attended or upcoming. It allows us to use the add edit show view that we hooked up through the swipe actions before. But this time for those attended shows, just in case we needed to change something. Maybe I got the date wrong, or the venue is incorrect. It gives the user those options within this form. Very, very clean and clear user experience. And the functionality of our app is really solid. We just have some polishes to make. That's where the next chapter, which is onboarding, is going to come into play. So let's go ahead and dive on into onboarding. All right, welcome to onboarding. So currently when the user opens our app, even for the first time, they are immediately dropped on the attended sheet. And if they don't have anything, like we can see in the upcoming, we do have that very basic empty state, but we should probably enhance the user experience. But how do you show something only on the first launch? Well, a lot of people reach for a database, but the answer is one line, a single bool stored in user defaults. By the end of this chapter, you'll have a 4-page onboarding flow, a notification permission request timed correctly for the App Store, and the transition into your main app, all gated by one persistent bool. So the first question is, where does that bool live? And it's not going to be in a model, not in a view model, but it's actually going to live in user defaults, and we'll use app storage in the SwiftUI property wrapper that connects directly to user defaults and triggers a view update whenever the value changes. So by default, we have user defaults, and this is something that's very traditional. From here, you use the .standard, and then you can give your data type, string, in this case it'd be bool, and then we pass through a key, which is a string. Think of this as kind of like a save file. This bool lives in this save file with this name, has completed onboarding, right? So we have our data type, and then we have the key name. Now, when we're looking at app storage, you'll notice it's very similar. We use the @app storage property wrapper. From here, we look at that name, and we would give it the exact same key as the user defaults. Then we can say something like, oh, hey, it's a variable. Just like when we're setting up state variables, we'll also give it the name, has completed onboarding. I typically give it the exact same name as whatever the key is, and then we'd have it equal the default state, in this case, false. So the string we pass in is the user default's key. The default value here, false, is actually only used when the key doesn't exist yet. The first time the app launches, the key doesn't exist. So has completed onboarding is false. The moment we set it to true, user default writes it, and every view holding this property wrapper re-evaluates. So there's no polling, no observers, the bool changes, SwiftUI re-renders, just like state, that's the whole mechanism. Now, the question is, what does re-rendering mean, and where do we actually put this? So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this file. We don't need it anymore, it's just for the demo. And we're gonna head on over into our app entry file. So for me, that was called Encore app. So this is the app entry point. And when we have our window group here, the body is evaluated just like any SwiftUI view body. When its dependency changes, it actually re-renders. So we can actually add an app storage property to the app struct, wrap the root in a plain if else, and replace the bare main tab view from chapter 3, I believe we made that all the way back in with an if else, and on that else, we can go to the onboarding. So let's quickly build it. As I mentioned, we're going to add this under the app struct. So we're going to add app storage. We'll give it the key of has completed onboarding. We'll then create a private var. We'll give it the same name, has completed onboarding, and by default, this is going to be false, just like we showed in the example. Then in our window group, we'll add the if right before it, and we'll wrap it in those braces. Then we can add an else. So what are we looking for in this if statement? Well, we're looking to see if that has completed onboarding is true. So when the user has completed the onboarding here, they'll be taken to the main tab. Else, if they haven't, when that variable is false, we're going to take them, and we don't have this built yet, but we'll make it in just a second. We're going to take them to the onboarding view. So the app storage here and the one inside onboarding view are going to share the same user defaults key when we build it. They're going to be the exact same value. When onboarding view sets has completed equals true, the app struct dependency changes. SwiftUI reevaluates the body, and main tab actually replaces the onboarding view. So essentially when they've completed it, we'll flip the Boolean and we'll be taken to the main tab view. We don't actually have to go here from the onboarding view and then navigate into the app. The root switches, and that's the gate. So we haven't built the onboarding view yet. So let's go ahead and construct that. We're going to go to our views and we're going to right click, new file from template, SwiftUI view, and we'll call it onboarding view. Now we have our imports, and we're actually going to be allowing the users to opt into notifications in this onboarding view. So we're going to also be importing user notifications. Don't need SwiftData here because, again, we're handling this all with app storage. Under our struct of onboarding view here, we're going to add our app storage. Now, what key are we looking at? The exact same one. I think I still have it copied here. The has completed onboarding view. And this will also be a private var, same name equals false. I'm also going to add two state private vars. The first one is the current page. As I mentioned at the top of this chapter, we're going to be having 4 pages for them to flip through. And then we're also going to have the state private var or the notifications requested. And by default, that will equal false. The user has to opt in and accept notifications. We can't have that turned on by default. That's a permission they need to give us. So we're going to start off with the current page of 0, which is the first page. When we're dealing with arrays in Swift, we always start with the number 0. So now we need the page data. Rather than hard coding each page as a separate view, the 3 feature pages are going to share the exact same layout. Only the icon, color, title, and description will change. And an array of tuples is actually enough. So still before our variable body of some view, we're going to create a private let, and we'll call this one pages. We'll add our colon, we'll add our square brackets, and a bracket within there. So we're going to take a few parameters: icon, color, title, and description. We'll start with our icon, which will be a string value. We'll add a comma. Our color will be a color value with a capital C. Our title will be a string. And finally, our description, also a string. Outside of the square brackets, we're going to have this equal, and we're going to pass through our array of data. So for our first, and we're going to do these in order. So the first one we're going to have is displaying their concert history. So we're using an icon as a string because we're going to be using the SF symbols. So I'm going to start off by, we can do our Command-Shift-L, and I'm going to have this be a ticket. I'm going to opt to do the ticket.fill for this one in the string. So this is our icon, comma, what color do we want to have? I love purple as a color, so I'm going to do dot purple. And then our title. Well, in our app, the first thing that they get taken to is their concert history. Then we can include a description. I'm just going to quickly say something like log every show you've been to. They can also build a record of your live music journey. Outside the brackets, we'll add a comma, and we're going to make the next 2 pages. So for this one, we're going to be talking about the details. I'm going to do the music.mic, I'm going to do the circle.fill for this one. Again, I'm making these design choices. If you want to customize yours, always feel free to do so. I'm going to do pink for this one. We'll do the title, which is every detail captured. And then for the description, I'll just have what we have: set lists, ratings, notes. Everything that made each night unforgettable. And we're going to have one more page following this, which is nodding to the upcoming shows. So for this one, I'm going to have the calendar here. We'll do a different color. Let's do blue. It's pretty similar to the other ones. And we'll say never miss a show. And then for the description, save upcoming concerts and keep track of what's on your radar. Wonderful. Okay, for the fourth page that we're going to have, that's going to be handling our notifications, so we can leave that for now. After this kind of square bracket, holding our array of those pages, and before the variable body of some view, we're also going to have a private var tracking, is this the last page? And this will be a Boolean value. We'll then add a brace, and we'll look at the current page to double equal the pages.count. Essentially, when we're at the total number of pages, it'll flag, hey, you're now on that last page. We're then going to actually, right up here, going to create a private function to advance. So the way it's going to advance is it's going to check, okay, is this the last page? If so, we're going to flip that onboarding to be true. And remember what's going to happen. When that state changes, or that Boolean value changes, our root view is going to be like, oh, hey, I can now boot into the main tab view. That's what I want to be displaying. We'll do if is last page, add our brace, has completed onboarding equals true. Else, we're going to actually, with animation, I want it to look pretty, we're going to add our brace, and we're going to take our current page to plus equals 1. This is going to allow us with animation to advance to those pages until we get to the last one. After we press advance on the last page, we'll go ahead and flip to the main root view. Okay, in our variable body sum view, let's go ahead and design it. Because we've already put in most of the work, we can have our VStack here. And I'm actually going to create a tab view. And our selection in this tab view is going to be based off of the binding, we'll use a $sign, of the current page. We'll then add our brace. We can use for each to loop through all the pages. So we'll look at our pages.indices, and then our ID will be that /.self. Make sure you have the colon on ID here. We'll then add our brace, and we'll say index in. Then we're going to be looking at a custom, which we haven't created yet, a onboarding page view. And we will come back to this in just a minute, but we will be tagging this with the .tag with the index. Outside of the for each, so we're going to go down one brace, we're then going to be creating and referencing, we haven't created it yet, the onboarding notifications page, which is kind of like that last page where we can get the user permission. So we're just going to reference it now. And within the brackets here, we're actually going to be passing through the notifications requested, which is going to be based off the binding of notifications requested. And this one's also going to have a tag, which would be the pages.count. I'm also going to go down one more brace just so we can finalize this page, and then we can come back and see it all together when those other pages have been built. And we're going to add the tab view style here. So we'll do the .tab view style. For the style here, I'm going to do the .page, and then I'm going to actually add more brackets for the index display mode as always. This is a design choice. This is the modifier that gives you the page swipe behavior and the kind of little dot indicators at the bottom. .always here essentially means that the dots render when there's only one item. You never write a custom page control for this. We can also add a .animation after this if we want real quick, and I'm going to do the ease in out, and that value is going to be based off of the current page. We have these very luxurious kind of animated pages. We'll have those 4 pages, dots, swipe navigation. Our framework handles all of it. Now we do need a way to continue through these pages. We do have that function of advance. So after our styles here, we're going to add a button and we're going to pass through the action here in the brackets. For this action, it's that advance we had created. We'll then add our brace, and then we're going to have some text here. And for the text, we're going to be looking at the value of is last page through our ternary operator. If that's the last page, we'll have it say like, let's go, like dive on into the app. Else it will say continue. Right, so as they go through the pages, it says continue, last one, let's go. You can kind of have that custom message. We can give it some style, so I'll add some font. I'll make it headline here. That's quite large. We can add a frame. I'm going to set the max width to be infinity, so dot infinity. We can add some things like padding, some background color. So we'll do the dot background, and I'm going to make the color dot accent color, which I believe by default is kind of that iOS blue. And then we'll have the foreground style of white. The foreground style is going to change the text color, so blue with the white text. And then we can even add a clip shape for our text here. And I'm going to set that one to be the rounded rectangle with the corner radius of, let's do 16. I feel like that's a pretty good size there. I'm then going to go down to the end of this button here, and I'm going to add a little bit of padding. I'm going to set it to be horizontal so we have room on the side, and a little bit of padding off the bottom so it's not all the way at the bottom. And I'll set that to be a pretty high number, like 32. Okay, so this is handling our onboarding pages. Before we even get to check it, we need to make the onboarding page view and the notifications page. So let's right click on our views, new file from template, and let's start off by doing our onboarding page view. So we'll give it that exact name. So this is going to be the shared layout for the 3 feature pages in a standalone struct. It's going to be pretty small. It's going to have no logic and no state. We'll remove our text of hello world. Under our struct, we're going to create some lets. The first one is the icon. And you'll notice these are all from our tuple. So we'll give them the exact same name, not inon icon there, and value types. So the color will be a color, the title string, and then finally the description, which is also a string. Cool, in our variable body of some view, let's go ahead and customize it. You can pass through if you want in the preview here. You just have to provide it with some dummy information. We can go ahead and pull that up on the canvas if we want. Otherwise, we'll be having our VStack here. We can include some spacing. I'm going to do 24 so it has lots of breathing room. We'll then add a spacer here to push the content. And we're going to put one at the top and then actually a couple more at the bottom. First thing I want to display is that image, which is actually going to use that system name. And we don't have to pass through that custom string because we're handling that with the icon. We can also give it some style. Like I want it to be pretty large. So we're actually going to set a system size for that. And we'll set it something really big like 90. We can then include the foreground style. And for the foreground style, we already have the color. We'll then do a text view where we're just passing through the title. Again, this is very modular. Have the font, search title. You can also bold it. Maybe we can do some multi-line text alignment and make sure it's in the center. We can have some text for the description next. Give it a smaller font, like maybe body. You do the foreground style as secondary, so it's that more kind of grayed out color. And then the multi-line text alignment, we're also going to put that in the center. So everything kind of lives in the middle. And then we're going to actually put a couple spacers here at the bottom. So everything should kind of live more in the middle before the button. The button's kind of going to live a little bit off the bottom of the page. And we'll add some global padding to the entire VStack here. Okay, so this is our onboarding page view. Again, these last 2 spacers are very intentional to kind of push it up from the bottom. Visually, it's going to kind of read as center top, which leaves room for that continue button below the tab without the icon feeling cramped. So we've set the stage for those 3 pages, plugged in all that information. So if we look back at our onboarding view, where we're calling upon it, we have to pass through a bit of that information. So we're going to have our icon, which is going to be based off of what we had called up here. I believe it was pages. Yep. So it's going to be based off the pages. And it's going to look at the index. So depending on which one it is in the index, 0, 1, or 2. And then it'll have the dot icon for that. We'll repeat this for the color. That'll be the pages array of index dot color. Looks a little bit janky. Then next we had the title. Keep in mind, these do have to go in the exact same order. We'll have the index dot title. And then finally the description, I believe. So description, pages, index dot description. There we go. And that should resolve that error. The only error we have left is our onboarding notifications page. So let's go to our views, right click on that, new file from template. And as I mentioned, we're going to be grabbing some information from the user. This one's going to be the onboarding notifications page. Very long title there. It even gets truncated in the project navigator on the left. Interesting. Okay, well, let's go ahead and now for that last page, request the notifications from the users so they can be notified to come back to the app. And before we actually wire anything, the timing really matters, and it's kind of worth this 30-second detour. Apple rejects ATT prompts, so think of those as this app needs to use your microphone or would like to use your location immediately on launch. The reasoning is that no context equals no consent. The exact same logic applies to the notification permission requests. If the request authorization fires on your very first view load with no explanation, reviewers have flagged that under the same unsolicited prompts category. It's not a guaranteed rejection, but it's a documented risk. Asking inside the onboarding on a page labeled Show Reminders with a sentence explaining what the notifications are for establishes that context before the system dialog appears. That's the pattern Apple's own human interface guidelines recommends. So that's what we're building, the notification page. We're going to start off under our struct with a @binding var called notifications requested. And this is going to be a Boolean, so true or false, but we're going to mark it just as bool. Then we're going to have our page, and we're going to set this up very similarly to our onboarding page view, but we have to make it a little bit more custom compared to the one we had done for the onboarding page views. So I'm going to have my spacing set to be 24, so it's consistent. I'll then throw in a spacer. Then we'll have our image, which is going to be that system name. For this one, I'm going to do something that reminds me of notifications. So let's look at the bell. And I believe it's the bell circle.fill. Yes, this one to me says notifications. And if we really want to make sure it stays on brand, we can go back to our onboarding page view. And I'm going to copy everything from the font style all the way down to the double spacers. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. We'll just need to change the text to be a custom title of Show Reminders. And the description, we'll have to write that out as well. So what is the reason that we're requesting notifications? Well, we want them to get notified before upcoming shows. So you're always ready. Oh, and for the foreground color, we had done purple, pink, I believe. Let's do orange, another one of my favorites. Now, the other thing is before our double spacers here, so after our description text, we have the binding of notifications requested, which is passed down from onboarding view. We want to use it to swap the button for a confirmation label once the user taps. So if the notifications are requested, what we had created above, that Boolean, we'll add a brace and we'll have a little label here. And we'll say that you're all set. We can include a system image, and let's do the checkmark.circle.fill. We'll give it a foreground style of green. That may, green typically signals to the user, go, you're all good to go there. And we can also set the font to be headline. You can of course do a custom size too. So if that's all set up, we have the all set, else we'll need to handle that other state. And we're going to give them a button to actually enable notifications. So the way we can have them enable notifications is the UN notification center. Before we access that, we're going to make sure we've also in this file imported user notifications. Now that we've handled that, we'll set the UN user notification center, and we'll look at the .current. So what does it currently have? Then we'll trigger the .request authorization. Within the brackets here, we're going to give them some options. So the options are, we'll add our square brackets here for the list, the .alert, comma, the .sound, and we also want to have the .badge. Now it's asking us for a completion handler. We're going to handle this custom. So we're going to delete that. Outside the bracket, we'll add our brace. So for the state of granted, we could look at the granted, comma, underscore in. Then we're going to use our dispatch queue, .main, .async. So it's going to run on the main thread here. And then for the code, we're going to have the notifications requested Boolean flip to be true. I'm then going to go to the end of this button here, so down 3 braces, and I'm going to give it the button style of my favorite, bordered prominent, which is honestly crazy that for Noah Does Coding build, this is the first time we have the bordered prominent. Okay, and after the spacing, we're just going to add some padding so it's consistent with the other page. Essentially, the way this works is that the request authorization call that we're doing right here after the current passes through alert, sound, and badge, which are 3 standard notification types. The closure fires on a background thread, which is why we use dispatch queue.main.async to wrap the state mutation. Every UI update must land on the main thread. Skipping that wrapper produces some weird intermittent crashes, the kind that only appear under specific threading conditions, which makes them pretty much invisible during development and easy to ship accidentally. We're then setting the notifications requested to be true, regardless of whether granted is true or false. The permission result matters for scheduling, and that's a separate conversation. But for onboarding, all we need to know is that the user was asked. Whether they say yes or no, we move on. We don't block them. So the full notification scheduling triggers, repeating reminders, that's a dedicated video, and I'm going to make an updated one in 2026, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. Otherwise, this chapter just gets you through the permission gate. The schedule comes later. Okay, we do have a couple errors. I believe it's just the preview down here. If you want to fill in the stub cert conformance, feel free to do so. I'm going to be pretty lazy and just delete the preview so we can go ahead and rock it in the app simulator. So let's go ahead and launch our app and view our beautiful onboarding and test it out. It succeeded. Wonderful. And while we are booting up, I'm just going to leave open our Encore app so we can see how it works. So we see we have our icon, it's pink, your concert history, we can press continue, we go to the next page. You don't even have to press continue, by the way. You can also swipe with your finger, or in my case, the trackpad, in order to go to the other pages. Never miss a show. And when we go to the last page, it says, let's go instead. And we have that enable notification. So when we press it, it would like to send us notifications. They may include alert, sound, icon badges, so it can be configured. So we can either choose to allow or not allow. I'm going to opt to set allow. You're all set. And then now we can press the let's go, and we're taken into the app. So again, when the Boolean value flips and it's being triggered inside of the onboarding view, it then says to the window group, we can now look, oh, the has completed onboarding, and I can take them to the main tab view. Now, what happens if I launch the app again? Well, with our logic, we should be taken immediately into the main tab view. So our onboarding won't fire again. See, there we go. But let's say you need to test it again. You know, maybe there's a problem, or you're actually recustomizing them and the preview isn't working, or whatever the case is of retesting it. You have kind of 2 options. Option 1 is if you go back to the home page by pressing the house on the simulator, you can press and hold and actually remove the app by deleting it this way. Then you would just go back in Xcode and hit the play button, and it would reinstall on the simulator. You can also typically use other simulators like the iPhone 17 Plus, and it has separate saves. The other option is actually to initialize, and I would never, ever, I can't stress this enough, never ever ship with this, but you would put an initializer, empty parameters, you would add your brace, and you would look at the user defaults .standard, and you would remove the object. for the key of has completed onboarding, whatever the name of this key is up here. So now when we launch it, it's going to look at the key, it'll initialize and remove the key. Never, again, can't stress enough, never ship this line. It would reset onboarding for every single user on every launch. So for development, fine, but it needs to be removed. See, the onboarding's back. We didn't uninstall. Anyway, so it would fire every single time. So I just want to mention it for, when you're developing things, but for actual production or when you're shipping to the App Store test flight, never include that line. So that's onboarding. It allows for a premium user experience and also allows the users to get to know a little bit more about what our app's capable of before using it. It's something that a lot of apps consistently do, and a good onboarding is going to be able to allow new users to become permanent users. Okay, so you may have noticed in our tab view, we have the settings down here that has just been there since chapter 3. We haven't touched it quite yet. So upcoming in chapter 9, we're going to be taking a look at the settings. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So we have our attended and upcoming built, even with those placeholders, and we have some stats. Now for the settings page, a lot of settings screens are kind of a graveyard. Version number, toggle nobody touches, we're not building that. We're going to make it a screen that shows you your own concert history back to you. How many shows you've seen, who you've seen most, and let you export the whole thing in one tab. And the best part is, every number on the screen is data we've already built. We're not storing anything new, we're just deriving it from the query we already have. So let's go ahead and build it. So let's navigate in our views folder to the settings view. Perfect. So right now it just has some text that says settings. Let's go ahead and remove that and build it from scratch. So under our imports, we're also going to be importing SwiftData. Now, as you've done many times before, we're going to be adding our information for SwiftData. This time, however, we're only going to be adding the @query. We're not going to have it be sorted. Instead, we'll have a private var of all shows, which conforms to that class of show within the square brackets. We'll then have a state private var of our view model, which is going to equal something that doesn't exist yet. Because if we have view models for the other views, well, that means we're going to have our settings view model. Now we'll throw an error until we actually create it, and we'll build that right after we do the view. The view won't take long. Let's have our navigation stack inside the view, add a brace, and we're going to immediately have a form. Forms are perfect for settings pages. We'll have our sections. We'll have the first one say your stats. We'll add a brace, and we're just going to add a comment for now, and we'll have our stats rows. And this will be section 2. We'll add another section after that one. This will be notifications. Again, we'll add a brace and just have a comment where our reminders toggle will go. Another section, which will be your data. Once again, a comma, which will actually be our ShareLink. We'll have our comment of a ShareLink will go here. And then one more section, which is going to be the app section. We'll add a brace and we'll do a labeled content here, and we'll have the text that says version. And then we can actually grab what the version of the app currently is. By default, it's 1.0, but we can grab that information by looking at the bundle.main.info dictionary. From here, we're going to mark it with our question mark, add our square bracket, and we look at the string, and the string name is actually available in your build settings. So if you actually wanted to click on your build, go to the build information, you can look up the build version. If you want the quick answer, it's the CF bundle short version string. Outside the square brackets, we'll be looking at that as question mark a string value. Else we'll use our nil closing operator and do 1.0. That's like a little trick there where if you do bump up the version of your app, you don't have to come back and manually change it. We can just read it from whatever the app version is. Okay, let's go down. We're gonna go down to the end of our form here, down 2 braces, and we'll add our navigation title, which will just be settings. And we'll actually do the onAppear here. We'll add our brace, and we're going to look at our view model. Again, it doesn't exist quite yet, but we're going to then look at the check notification status, which is something that we'll build. So before we hop into the view model, notice that the query is at the top. This is the same live query that Attend tab uses. Now the rule still holds that query needs a view environment. So it lives in the view, not the view model. No sort here because we're not displaying it in a list. We just need the array to count and group. The version row is already done. It's going to read the marketing version straight from the bundles info dictionary. No hard-coded string, so it always matches whatever you set in the generals tab. That's the number that the app reviewer sees, so reading it live keeps the UI honest. Everything else so far is a placeholder comment. Let's fill them in, starting with the stats. So we are going to make a new view model. So right-click on the view model folder, new empty file, and we'll call it settings view model. Wonderful. All right, we're going to start off with our imports, and we're going to start with SwiftData. We'll also be importing user notifications and import foundation. SwiftData so we can access the saves, user notifications for those notifications, and foundation for date. We're also going to be marking this with @observable. We'll then create our final class, and we'll call it settings view model and add our brace. So we're going to start off with the first thing, which is the notification flag, and a set of pure functions that turn the show array into numbers. So our variable is going to be the notifications enabled. By default, it'll be false. Again, we always need that user permission. Then we'll create a method that we'll use func, and we'll call it attendedCount. In the brackets, we're going to do our underscore space shows, which is going to conform to the array of the show class. And we're going to be actually returning a integer value. We'll then add a brace. We're going to use the shows.filter. We're going to add our brace, and we'll look at the $0, so the first element, dot status, and we're going to double check to make sure it's dot attended. And then outside the brace, we're going to use the dot count. So we're going to get the total number. Again, it's an integer, so we have the number as such. We're then going to kind of do similar logic. So we've counted for how many shows they've attended. Now let's count for how many are upcoming. So we'll do the upcoming count. Pretty much same thing, underscore shows, that list of capital S show, and we'll be returning an int. We'll add our brace, and then we'll do the shows.filter. And this time, we're going to be looking for the first element, so $0.0.status. Double equal the upcoming. Again, dot count, the total number of that. Okay, then we want to have a count for how many shows they've seen this current calendar year. So we'll do func seen this year, a little bit of camel casing. Once again, we're going to be looking at the underscore shows, look at the show class, and then we're going to be returning an integer value. It's a whole number. Wouldn't make sense if we were counting 0.7 of a show. All right, then we'll establish our year. So let the year, and we're going to be looking at the capital C calendar, and we want the .current .component. We'll choose the autofill with the component from. So we want to look at the current year. Right now, as of recording, it's 2026. So we'll do the from now. It's going to grab the exact date and time and say, okay, what year is it right now? We're then going to return. And for here, we'll have our shows.filter once again. We're getting a lot of value out of that. We'll add our brace, and we'll once again look at the $0.0.status. And we're going to be looking, we'll do our double equals for the dot attended. And we can use the and check with the double ampersand. So we're going to say, okay, it's something you've attended, and look at the calendar, .current, .component. And for this one, we're going to be looking at the year component. What year is it? And then for the from, we're going to look at the $0.0.date. Outside of the bracket, we're going to double check to make sure that matches the year. Again, this is that let we had created above. So if this filters and says, oh, hey, this is also something you've seen in the current year, we'll then add our dot count. So we establish what year it is first. Then we, kind of filter what all those shows their attended year is. If that matches what it is right now, so in this case 2026, it'll count to that. One more function before we wire it all up, which is going to be the top artists. We're going to create another function for our stats, which will be the top artist. Let's say you've seen the same artist multiple times. We'll show who that is and set that up the same way, our array of show. And we're actually going to be returning a string this time, and we'll mark it as optional. The string because that's how our artist names are held. So we're going to establish what we've attended, which is going to equal the shows.filter. I'm not going to use the autofill, but we will add a brace, and we'll add the $0.0.status, and we're going to check that against the double equals of .attended. Then we're going to establish our counts to equal, and we're going to use a capital D dictionary. In our dictionary, we're going to have our grouping and by. So what is the sequence? Well, that's the attended we just created above. And how is it grouped by? Well, we can do our \artist name. We're then going to use our .map values. And how are we going to transform this? Well, we're going to look at the \count. We'll then return the counts.max. We'll add our brace, use our $0.0.value. And if this is less than the other value, so $1.value, then we're going to use our question mark .key. Okay, I feel like I explained most of these functions, but for the top artist, this one's a little bit more kind of confusing. Kind of the more interesting one too. When we have our dictionary here, and we're grouping it, it kind of buckets around the attended show by artist name. Then our map values collapses each bucket into count. And then the max here finds the artist with the highest count. It returns an optional with our optional key here, because if you haven't logged anything yet, there couldn't possibly be a top artist. Now let's quickly wire these into the stat section. So we're going to return to settings view. All right, so our section of stats row, we can remove the comment if we want. We're going to be doing our labeled content for this one, as it's pretty well formulated. We'll do our shows attended. Then we'll add a comma, and we need to provide it with some value. Well, that value, we can actually make it a string, and we'll use our string interpolation, so our backslash and then our brackets. We'll look at the ViewModel, then we'll use the .attendedCount. Then we'll look at all shows. Now we're going to basically be copying this pattern, so if you want to save some time, we can copy and paste this label a couple more times. We'll just need to update it. So our second label content here will be the upcoming. The value instead of attended count will be the upcoming count. Still with those all shows. And then the third one we'll do seen this year. For this value, it will be based off of the seen this year. That's why we named them, so it's very easy to reference in our code. We're then going to put an if let, and we'll look at the top artists. It's if let because we might not have any entries. We'll then have the ViewModel.top artists for all shows. If that's the case, we'll add our brace here. And we'll look through that labeled content again. And we'll just say like most seen artist. We'll add a comma, and that value will be top artist. So again, labeled content is the right tool here, a label on the left, value on the right, and the native setting style for free. And as I mentioned before, with our if let top artist equals, we're kind of doing that check. It only is going to appear, and it's handling for that optional. So an empty app doesn't show a blank row. That would look a little bit janky. Okay, we actually could go ahead and comment off the onAppear and test it out, but we'll do some testing at the end. Next, we have our notifications or our ShareLink. I'm going to opt to do the export with ShareLink next, because people want data to be theirs. We can let them take their concert history with them, and we'll do it with one of the best one-liners, in my opinion, in SwiftUI. Let's hop back into our settings view model. We'll go down one brace because we're going to be making another function, another method, right? We'll do func, and we'll call it export text. For our brackets, we're going to look at the underscore shows, pass through the array of capital S show, and this time we're going to be returning a string. However, it does not need to be optional. Okay, so we're going to have our let of attended. From here, that's going to equal the shows. And from here, we'll use our very good friend of dot filter. Now, what are we filtering? We'll add our brace. Look at the $0 We'll check to make sure it's dot attended. And then we'll also use the then we'll do a dot sorted here. And we'll do our custom logic again. Let me guess, $0 Yep. And if that's greater than, we'll have the $1 Perfect. We're then going to have a guard here, and we're going to check for the opposite of attended is empty. Else we'll go ahead and we'll be returning. We can actually, with this return, include a string. As a note, because this function expects a return of string, we can apply a little custom method here. So we'll say no shows logged. Then we'll establish our lines. So let lines equal the attended, and we can use our dot map here. We'll add a brace. We'll look at the show in. Within the logic, we'll have the first thing be the date, which is going to equal the show.date. And we can actually format that as well. So we'll use the formatted, and we can use the .date time here. So we'll set it to be the month, and we can also have then the day and the year. So it's going to format it for the month, day, year. If you want to do day, month, year, or year, month, day, whatever you want to do, you can change the logic, but I find that's pretty easy to read. Then, just like before, we're going to return, and we're going to return a string. We can once again do our string interpolation. So we'll start off by having the date. I'm then going to do a dash. I'll also string interpolate separately the show.artistName. I'll do at, and then we can include the show.venue. And then comma, the probably show city. So let's also interpolate that. Wonderful. We're going to go down one brace here and do one more return statement. We can do a full string here and say my Encore concert history. Then I'm going to do \n here. Then we'll do a plus, and we'll have the lines.join separator. And then we want separator, and that string value is the \n we had. So put string \n. Okay, so this is a sample function shape. We have the array come in, we have the value out. We filter to attended, we sort to the newest first, and bail early with a friendly string here saying, hey, no shows logged if there's nothing to export. Then we use our attended.map for each show into a one-line summary where we have the date, name, venue name, and city. And then we finally joined them under the new kind of title here with our Encore concert history with a title. Okay, now let's wire this back into our settings view, and we're going to use the ShareLink. So under the your data, we had commented the ShareLink here. We'll reference that ShareLink, one word, and we're going to be passing through the item. And that item is going to be the ViewModel.export text of all shows. We'll then add our custom brace here, and we're going to have a label. Let's have it say export history. And for the system image, let's go ahead and see if we can find the square and arrow up. This to me is very iconic for sharing. So I'm going to copy that string. We'll add our system image and paste in that string. Now we also want this to be .disabled if the all shows is empty. If there's no shows to export, yes, we're handling that in the function as well with no shows logged. That's a guard just in case anything funky happens, but we're disabling the ShareLink if it's empty to begin with. Again, I love the ShareLink. You're very familiar, if you've used iOS for a long time, you're probably very familiar with that little pop-up sheet where you can share to other apps, save to notes, etc. Okay, so in the previous chapter, we did ask for notification permission during onboarding, and we can see this error has kind of been our thorn in the side for the past little bit. Some users skip that or change their mind later. The settings toggle is where they can reconcile it, and it has one subtlety worth getting right. So in our settings view model here, go down one brace and we're going to make another method. So func, and we'll call it request notification permission. Now we don't need anything within the brackets, but we are going to add our brace and we're going to look at the UN user notification center dot current dot request authorization. Just like before, we're going to have those options, which is an array. The array here is going to be dot alert, dot sound, and dot batch, just like before. For completion handler, once again, we're going to make that custom, so we can delete that and instead add our brace. We'll look at the granted, comma, underscore in. Probably like, wow, we made this before, it looks pretty similar. Exactly. We'll then have the dispatch queue, dot main, dot async, choose the autofill with code, and we'll look at the self dot notifications enabled equals granted. Then we're going to create one more function here, which is the check notification status. So not only are we requesting it, you also remember with that on appear, we want to call upon that check. So whenever the settings page appears, it's going to run this check with the function. So func check notification status. We'll add a brace. It's going to be very, very similar. So UN notification center dot current. And this time we'll look at the dot get notification settings. Now again, custom completion handler. So we'll actually delete all those brackets and instead add a brace. We'll look at the settings in, make some space here. We'll look at the dispatch queue, dot main, dot async, autofill with code. And we'll look at the self.notifications enabled to equal the settings. And we can look at the dot authorization status. And we're going to use our double equals to make sure it's dot authorized. So essentially the check notification status reads the true system authorization state, which runs from the dot on appear we've already wired up. So the toggle always reflects reality when the tab opens. The actual requesting of notification permission triggers that system prompt. Both completion handlers fire off the main thread, so every single UI mutation goes back to main with dispatch queue.main.async. If you miss that, and you'll get a purple runtime warning or perhaps a crash. Now back in our settings view, let's go ahead and wire it up. So I believe we had our second one, our reminders toggle. So we'll go ahead and create a toggle with a capital T. We'll have this be called show reminders. Add a comma. The isOn value is based off of a custom binding. So we'll do our custom binding with the get and the set. So for the get, we'll add our brace and we'll look at the view model dot notifications enabled. For our set, once again, add the brace and we'll look at enabled in. We'll hit return and we'll say, okay, so if enabled, add a brace again, lots of braces. We'll look at the view model dot request notification permission. So here is a bit of a subtlety. The toggle is deliberately actually one direction. Flipping it calls the request notification permission. Flipping it off actually does nothing because you can't revoke notification permission from inside the app. Only the user can in iOS settings. So our get that we have here reflects the real authorization status, and the set only acts on the way on. Modeling it honestly beats pretending you have control that you don't. So let's go ahead and now check out our settings. We're going to go ahead and run the app. You can also check it in the preview, but because we have real data in the simulator, I'm going to opt to show it there. Okay, here's our app. We can now go to settings. Woohoo! We now have shows attended. We don't have any upcoming right now, which does reflect the real data. We've seen 2 this year. Now it is saying that the most seen is Beyonce. It's basically just saying, okay, this is the one that you've seen first. Therefore, I'm displaying that one. If we had multiple of the same, we could of course display that. If in your app, if the max value is 1, you can also choose to do an if statement to check that data and not display the most seen if they don't exist. This is my design choice. We have these show reminders, which is on, but remember, this is our toggle to basically say, yes, this has been turned on. If we had said no during the onboarding, this would then be set off. We have our export history here. And when we press it, it takes usually a second on the simulator, I find, And there's that pretty common share sheet. On your actual device, you probably have a lot more options already showed up. Let's go ahead and edit this. I'm just going to choose to copy it real quick. And I'm just going to go to my messages just so we can paste. Here's this message with John Appleseed. But we can see what the data looks like. My Encore concert history. We have the spaces because of the \ns. We can see sample at and then Beyonce. So this is how you can copy and paste it if the user wants to put it to like a PDF later on, Excel sheet, right? Totally up to you, but I just wanted to have that ability to copy and export the history. And we also have the version number. Whereas if we go over here, we can look and see version 1.0. As we increment this 1.1 to 2.0, instead of it being hard-coded, it'll grab that information from the app. So this is pretty much our full app in action. Now there are 2 more chapters left, but the next one is going to be our shortest chapter yet. And then finally, we're going to be looking at some App Store prep so you can properly launch your app. So let's go ahead and dive on into chapter 10, where we're going to be re-looking at our empty states. So currently with our app, we are handling empty states. The way we're doing that is in our attended and our upcoming. And because we're looking at the upcoming, let's go ahead and check that one out. We do have that group, which is basically saying, okay, if this is empty, if we have no shows in our list, we're actually showing the content unavailable view. And this is fantastic. Now, the content unavailable view is something that you can also expand upon ever so slightly, because right now it is doing a pretty good job, but it's not quite a full user experience. It just has no upcoming shows. Now, most users will be able to deduct, okay, I can press plus, I can add it, but what if we made it a little bit more clear? This chapter is mostly about very short, enhancing the user experience. We're going to be expanding upon this content unavailable view by making it a little bit more modular. We're going to create our own custom empty state view. In our views, we're going to right click, new file from template, SwiftUI view, and we'll do empty state view. From here, we essentially want to be using that content unavailable view, but we're going to be passing through the icon, title, and message. So under our struct, we'll have our let for icon, which will be a string. We're using those SF symbols. We'll then have the let for the title, again, string, and the message, which would also be a string. Then in our variable body of some view, and you can watch how fast this is, we'll reference that content unavailable view again. And this time we're going to pass through the title, the system image, which is going to be the icon, and then the description, which is going to be a text view with that message. So we have 12 lines basically that we're using in this file, and I'm just going to quickly delete the preview. If you want to fill it in, feel free to do so. But essentially we're passing through the title, system, image of that icon, and then the description. Then every tab can call it identically. So let's go ahead and wire it into our tabs. We'll go back to our attended view, where we have the content unavailable view. Instead now we'll call upon the empty state view, and we'll choose the autofill where we can fill in the information. For the icon, we'll do the music.mic. For the title, we have this be a lot more in depth. We can look at the ViewModel.searchText.isEmpty. Then we'll use our ternary operator. We'll then say no shows yet. Else we can go ahead and display no results. This way we're handling the search case and the case when there's no shows. We can do the exact same thing for our message. We'll look at the ViewModel.searchText.isEmpty. And we'll do a ternary operator. In that case, we can say start logging for the concerts you've been to. Else we can go ahead and say try searching for something else. Right? Our logic can still say the exact same with the group, but the really interesting part is the title and the message. There are 2 reasons that the list can be empty. The user hasn't added anything yet, or they search something that won't match. This ViewModel.searchText.isEmpty kind of changes everything, and our title and our message changes too. Way more user-friendly. We'll then apply it to our upcoming view, and then we can test it in the simulator. So again, we're gonna, in our isEmpty of our group, we're gonna replace this with our empty state view. For the icon, we'll do calendar, And now there is no search here, so we can just say nothing coming up. And for the message, save shows you're planning to attend. So we have the same wrapper, and I don't think we have anything in the preview here. So let's go ahead and test this one first. We have a different icon, different copy, basically tuned to that tab's purpose. Now we just made it a lot more premium with that extra message, with that secondary font. And if we go to the attended view, let's load that one in the preview as well. So there's no shows yet. If we wanted to, we can quickly add one in the preview. I don't think my keyboard's still working in the preview. It is not. Thank you, Xcode. Okay, let's go ahead and run it in the simulator then, so I know we have things added. All right, here's our search. So we have sample and Beyonce. So I'm going to search Blink, and now we can see it's updated to no results. Try searching for something else. Again, by default, that searchable did give us a little bit of a no results, but this feels more on brand with the microphone. And we can kind of, even instruct the user to search for only venues, artists, or, we can make it a lot more clear and we can make it our own. So that is the empty states. As a reminder, an empty state isn't an issue, it's an opportunity for user experience to also help guide the user. As I mentioned in the upcoming, we might even want to say, press the plus button in the top right to add more shows. It's up to you how you want to guide the user or point out how they can populate this list or this view in this case. So because we're not doing any network calls, we typically don't really have to worry about error handling. There are some local error handlings that you can do. For instance, in a function for saving, you might want to include an error message with an alert, similar to the alert that we have wired up for when we're deleting something. It's up to you. But empty states kind of wrap the pattern. They can have context-aware copy, as we've seen in the attended views, and this is a good toolkit, especially for an offline app. So every tab in Encore now tells users exactly what's there, why nothing's there. Now I know this was a very short chapter. We are done writing code, and the next chapter is going to be all about App Store prep. So let's go ahead and dive on into that one. So welcome to the final chapter. Your app works, and every feature we've built across the past 10 chapters, it all runs as intended. But right now, it kind of just has, if you look at it, the home screen, no app icon. On older versions, you might have like that kind of blank screen and icon underneath. It looks like a project, not a product. This is the final chapter, and it's kind of the polished path. The last 10%, which weirdly is the first thing anyone actually sees. So we're going to give Encore a real app icon. We're actually going to be designing it in Keynote of all things, a proper launch screen, and then I'll show you exactly how close you are to shipping this. And at the end, if you want to keep going, I've got a whole list of where to take it next. So you can choose to design your app icon in any design software, even things like Figma, Canva, Photoshop, Illustrator. But for the simplest, quickest app icon, I actually like to use Keynote, and it's completely free. And it's probably already installed on your Mac. And it's a surprisingly good vector tool. So I'm going to open up Keynote. And it's going to prompt us right away to actually choose a theme. I'm just going to choose basic white, and you can choose wide or 4x3, it doesn't matter. Because the first thing we're going to be doing is in the top right, you'll see we kind of have this square here, which has our document options. Then we're going to go to our screen size and do custom slide size. From here, App Store requires 10 by 24 by 10 by 24 for our app size. That's the canvas that every app icon starts from. And you'll notice it actually has very jagged edges. Those rounded corners actually is given to us for free on the app icon. So we're going to delete all our placeholder information here, and you can design your app icon however you want. Typically, the rule for icons is simple wins. One idea, big, centered, and readable at the size of a fingernail. For Encore, there's a single mark. Now I'm going to opt to use the object library here, but you can always drag and drop in. And I'm going to search for music. And we can see we have tons of different options. And I think I'm going to go for this microphone. So I can just press on it. And if we close the window here, we can see the icons here. You can also drag and drop. Now I'm going to resize it to take up a pretty big portion of the screen. So if I resize my window, we can see that it's taking up a majority of the screen because, again, it has to be readable at the size of a fingernail. Let's make it large and in charge. Now you can actually click on this and use the paintbrush tool here to change the style. You can even do things like image fill, gradient fill, and for mine, I'm going to do a gradient fill. I want it to be pretty simple, and I'm going to have it go from this dark gray all the way to the white color. So it's a bit of a subtle gradient. Then I'm going to click on our background, and I'm going to change the current fill to a gradient fill, and I'm going to take some inspiration from our onboarding flow, and I'm going to do a custom color by pressing on the little color swatch here, and let's do purple. And then for the second color, again, press on the little color icon here. I'm going to do maybe a pink, kind of a purple pinkish gradient. And we can play around with these colors as much as we want, because maybe I'll make the top a little bit darker. And there we go. We can also adjust the angle. So if we want to play around with the direction that angle goes, maybe I'll do 300 or so degrees. So this is my chosen app icon. You can of course make it look as you want, but this will actually allow us to test our app icon. What I suggest doing is not taking a screenshot, but rather going to the very top of Keynote, File, Export to Images. Now this next part is very important. We're going to change it to be a PNG, and we're going to make sure it does not export with transparent backgrounds. Transparent backgrounds will immediately get your build rejected before it's even uploaded to App Store Connect. So we'll go ahead and save. Again, you might want to make your app icon look way better than mine. I'm just doing it pretty quickly. So I'm going to save this as the Encore app icon, so AI. I'll just put it on my desktop so it's easy to find. We'll go ahead and export it. We can now minimize, and in our resources folder, we have the assets. Then I'm going to open up that folder we have, and you'll notice we have the PNG. So I'm going to click on app icon, and then I'm going to drag and drop into the any appearances. Now you definitely can, if you don't see this option, you can open up the inspector over here, and under appearances, you can do any dark tinted. So you can have custom icons if the user is using the tinted theme, dark theme, or just one blanket theme for all appearances. Now when we run our app, we'll be able to see our app icon on the home screen. And again, as I mentioned, it will be the full square in the PNG, but it'll automatically get those rounded rectangles. You don't have to round the corners yourselves. Okay, we've booted into our app, but now when we go on the home screen, we can see our app icon. Again, I would probably do a little bit more designing on this. I went pretty quick, but that's how simple it is to add and create an app icon. Now, if we want to make it look even better, Xcode does come bundled with a tool. So in Xcode, you can press on Xcode in the very top left, open Developer Tool, and you'll want to open the Icon Composer. Typically, this is going to prompt you to either open something, or you can create a new document. I'm going to opt to create a new document from scratch. And this is your icon composer. If you don't have this available, you can go to your web browser. You can head on over to developer.apple.com. You can go to downloads, and under downloads, you should be able to go to design essentials, and you can see icon composers. And you also might want to download the SF symbols. I'd recommend downloading both of them if they're both not on your Mac already, but you can grab them here. You might just need to sign into your developer account. Even a free one works. So now that we have it installed, we can toggle between the dark background or kind of the expected background, kind of default here. And we can change things like the fill. So maybe we'll also do a gradient here. I'm going to do the pink to the purple, and you can do the custom colors if you want. Then down here in the bottom right, we have the default, dark, and mono. So I'm going to leave it on default for now, but you do have those different options. We can kind of design with these rounded edges in mind. We also toggle this kind of grid icon here for styling, as well as see how it looks at different sizes. So how would it look when it's really, really small versus the full 1024? So I'm just going to drag and drop the microphone in here. You do have, just like a lot of design softwares, the opacity, the visibility, what image it is, layout, and even the ability to change the size. So I'm going to make mine a lot bigger, like maybe 800%, maybe even 1000%. It's a pretty small PNG. You can keep playing around with it. And let's say I'm happy with this. You can also move it around. You can even see how it'll look with the liquid glass. It's totally up to you. So let's say you spent some time, you can add multiple images here, it is layerable, and you're happy with this new icon. What you'll then want to do is go to the file and then save. In this case, I'll just call it Encore app icon. I'll spell it out this time. And you'll actually get this .icon full file. So for mine, it's on the desktop. As an additional note, if you go to the file export, you can also get the different platforms, appearances, and different versions of the app icon as a flat PNG. But we're going to use the icon file here. What you'll need to do is go back in Xcode here, and where we have our custom app icon, we're going to be making a slight change. So we're going to be dragging it straight into our project, but I'm still going to put it under the resource folder. And we'll do copy to the target. Wonderful. So now we have this app icon, and you can even customize or open it in the icon composer. Then we're going to click on our app target, which is that kind of hammer file with our project name. We're going to navigate to the general tab, which we're already in, and under our app icons in launch screen, we can see we have our app icon just called app icon. Instead, we're going to point it to the other file. So we'll say Encore app icon. Now when we run the project, we'll wait for it to build, we'll go home, we can see it's using the icon file instead. So those are two different ways. Again, you can customize these way more than the way I'm customizing them right now. We even have dark mode, mono, etc., etc. You've also probably noticed when we've been launching our app, we have this blank white screen. So next is the launch screen. And first, let me kill a misconception. The launch screen is not a loading screen. Your app doesn't load behind it. iOS shows it for the split second sometimes, usually longer on the simulator, between the tap and your real first frame, purely so the app feels instant, which means the goal is the opposite of a flashy, kind of screen. We don't want spinner, progress bar, no big animated logo. The best launch screen is one that dissolves invisibly into your first screen or onboarding screen. There's actually a couple ways to do this. The modern way is a few keys in your info settings, but I want to show you the storyboard way because you'll see it in real projects, and it's pretty good to actually understand. You might get a new skill with a storyboard. So what we're going to be doing is under our resources here, we made that folder for a reason. We're going to right click and we're going to choose a new file from template. We're then going to go under user interface, and you can see we have storyboard, view, empty, or launch screen. Perfect. We're going to press next, and I'm going to leave the name of this file as launchscreen.storyboard. We'll go ahead and create. Now, if you've only ever worked in SwiftUI, you're probably thinking, what on earth is this? Well, this is our storyboard here. We're going all the way back to UIKit for just a moment. As I mentioned, we're going to keep it dead simple. We're going to set the background color a little bit, and it by default actually gives us the app name front and center. So we're going to click on the background here. We then have some options, and if these are hidden, you might just need to open up the inspector on the right panel here, and we're going to change the background color. By default, it's on custom, which is white, and you can choose a custom color with the color picker. However, I'm just going to choose one that's a little bit different. Maybe we'll do more of that purple. So now we have purple. We can even change the text color here. We can click on the text, and let's change this to be white. And you can make this way, way better, even with a gradient. If you want to include the app icon instead, you just have to change the storyboard. Now to get the storyboard to actually launch, we're going to go back to that app file here. And where we had the app icon, you'll also notice we have launch screen file. Now you should be able to just grab this from the dropdown, and we're going to check off that launch screen storyboard. And one more thing we need to change is in the info tab. And you'll notice down here we have the launch screen. We're actually going to remove that, and instead we're going to press plus here, and we're going to look for the launch screen interface file base name. Let's look for that. Launch screen interface file base name, and this is where you're going to pass through the name that's just launch screen. You don't need the extension. Let's press return. Now you might want to double check in your target, general, That our launch screen file is still here. Sometimes it clears when you mess with the info.plist. Let's go ahead and run it, and we'll notice that that little split second, now we'll have that custom. Again, you can design this way better, but instead of it sitting on that white kind of empty screen, we now have something that we can brand and enhance further. Again, this is a launch screen, not a loading screen. But there you have it. We have fully completed our app. So what's actually left between here and the App Store? Honestly, not too much. A lot of paperwork, and if you want to enhance the app, feel free to do so. But the flow, and I do have videos for this for both TestFlight and App Store launch, is essentially you would go to product, you would archive, and this sends and allows you to update and upload it to App Store Connect. From there, send it to TestFlight to test on real devices, fill in your listing, screenshot, description, privacy answers, and hit submit. Again, I'm not going to walk through all that here because I've already got 2 dedicated videos on it, one on getting your build into TestFlight and the other on the full App Store submission, start to finish. Both are linked in the description below, so check out both of those when you're ready. But maybe shipping isn't the point for you right now. Maybe you caught the bug and you want to keep building. So let me rapid fire some directions that you can take Encore. Every one of these is a real next project. So the first thing is we have all of our data within this model and with SwiftData. You might want to sync it with iCloud, and SwiftData does iCloud sync with barely any code changes. If you want a real backend with accounts and a web dashboard, that's Supabase. If you want Google Stack with real updates, maybe Firebase. You can also look to, as in our app, we do currently have things like the playlists, perhaps pulling in the Spotify API. So imagine tapping into an artist in Encore, seeing their top tracks, putting the set list into Spotify, maybe their image, a play button, or autofilling. Spotify's API can give you all of that. While you're at it, the Setlist.fm API has real set lists from real concerts, and Ticketmaster's API can surface upcoming shows near you. You may also want to include a home screen widget, maybe a countdown to your next show right on the home screen. So perhaps you can remind users the morning of a show and ask them to rate it the morning after. We can also do charts with ChartKit. We already kind of have those stats being pulled. Turn them into real visuals with Swift Charts. Show per month, your top artist, year. We also have the share that we're doing with the export. Generate a nice image of a show, artist, venue, rating that someone can post on their Instagram story. Also consider maps. Drop the venue in a map kit and have a map and maybe a route to get there for the day. So you can always go bigger as well. Bring it to iPad, bring it to Mac. Same code base, but more surface area. Any of those you can include on top of this build you've already made. You have the foundation, and these are just features bolted onto an app that already works. Now that as a reminder, the full build is also available on my GitHub, link in the description below. When you see this, it'll have a beautiful README, but every single one of these chapters was also tagged. Keep in mind, chapter 9 and 10 were kind of together here, but we do have chapters so you can access it at any point of the build. So it has been a journey. We went through MVVM, observable, SwiftData, navigation, lists and live queries, swipeActions, detail views, forms, validating those forms, star views, onboarding, settings, even making sure our empty states are beautiful, and finally the polish. Encore went from a blank Xcode project to a real app that you could ship. That's the whole arc, from your first line of SwiftUI to something you could put on the App Store. Again, if you were thinking about uploading something like this, customize it, build it more, make it your own. Use some of those ideas or your own ideas. As always, GitHub link in the description. You can fork it. Either way, you're not a beginner anymore. Thanks for sticking through for the entire tutorial. If this course got you here, please subscribe. This is the channel that takes you from your first line to a shipped app, and there's more coming. And if you ship Encore, your own version of it, tell me in the comments. The last 10% is what people see first. Now, go build the thing. And dream big, code bigger. Have an amazing rest of your day.